What's up, everybody? Still got about 3 minutes before we actually get started. So if you guys want to ask any questions, we can. We'll do a Q&A afterwards as well. I use VMware, so I'm using VMware Pro 12. You guys can see that? Hey, Infamous, how you doing, man? We're doing Kioptrix level 1 tonight, and we're doing Jerry as well from HackTheBox. All right, guys, it's 8 o'clock, so let's go ahead and get started. I thank everyone for joining me. So I'm going to go ahead and just kind of, for the first video, first stream, just kind of walk through what exactly we're doing. So if you're a beginner, or if you've never used VMware or a virtualization software. So I'm running Kali Linux virtualized right now, and I'm going to be running Kioptrix. You can see it up here as well, virtualized. I'm just going to show you how to go out and get it. I'm not going to download it or anything. I'm just going to show you the instructions on how to walk through, just kind of doing a basic setup with it. So if we just go out to Google and we search for the Kioptrix level 1, you can find the Vuln Hub right here. And there's a link down below for it as well if you need the link. And then you would just do this little download right here on the RAR file and unzip it. Yeah, there's going to be a stream capture later. So as soon as the stream ends, it'll be available on Twitch and also be available on YouTube. You can check the links down below if you need those links. So once we download this RAR and unpack it, then we can come into here and you just open up a virtual machine. And let me unhide this capture. So you show your virtual machine here, and you would just select this Kioptrix level 1 and select it. It'll open up and basically allow you to do settings. We can actually run it twice. Actually, no, we can't. We've already got it running. So it'll ask you for the settings. Let me pause this here. The only thing that you really need to change is when you come into here, On the edit virtual machine settings, the network adapter should be set to NAT as opposed to bridged. So that should allow you to see everything from your Kali machine. And then the default settings are pretty much fine. Hey, the Joker, how's it going? So I'm going to go ahead and resume this. You should have a login screen like this once you're up and ready. If you do fall behind, just let me know, but we'll have the recording later. Yeah, so it's kind of hard to zoom in on the VMware itself, but I'm going to keep you guys zoomed in for everything on the terminal side. So when we're trying to find this IP of Kioptrix, it just loads up a machine and it says, hey, there's Kioptrix log in here, but it's not really giving us any information as opposed to like, hey, it's at this IP address, or, you know, where are we at? So first of all, we need to know where that might be. We can run an ifconfig and just kind of look at our IP address. So for this whole lesson, I'm going to be running on 192.168.232.142. And there's a tool out there called NetDiscover, which uses ARP, and it will help us find this machine. So what we're going to be looking for is our first 3 octets, and then we could just do a .0 and do a /24 for the network. And it's going to send out ARP packets here, and hopefully something should stand out. Like for me, this 132 address stands out, running VMware. The rest of these, the .1, .2, that's doing routing, .254. So it should be something kind of in the middle like this. So we're going to go ahead and find this address. And when we find this address, let's just copy it. You can Control-C once you do that. And what we're going to be doing now is we're going to be running Nmap. So Nmap is network mapping. And we're just going to try to find what kind of ports are open. I'm going to type out the syntax, just follow along. And then once we do that, I'm going to explain what everything means. Okay, once you have this typed out, just go ahead and hit enter. It's going to take a few minutes for this to run. So while it's running, let's talk about Nmap. So what we're doing right now is we're doing something called a stealth scan. So when we do a stealth scan, what we're doing is we are sending a 3-way handshake, but we're sending a reset instead of an ACK. And let me kind of just show you what that looks like. So if you're familiar with a 3-way handshake, it kind of goes SYN, SYN-ACK, and ACK like this, right? So you say, hey, TCP, I want to connect on this port. TCP comes back and says, okay, I acknowledge that you want to connect. And you say, okay, I'm going to connect. So when we do a stealth scan, we say, just kidding, I'm going to reset that. I don't actually want to connect to that port. So what it was doing in the past was it was trying to be stealthy, right? It was trying to say, okay, well, if I'm not actually connecting this port, maybe I won't get picked up by, like intrusion detection. Intrusion detection knows about this kind of scanning now. Intrusion prevention knows about this scanning. So it's not really like a stealthy way, but it's still kind of important to know how it works. And so when we're doing that connection here, we're also picking a speed with this T4. If it does stealth scan by default, I'm not sure. That's a good question. So I haven't heard of that, but if it does, that's cool. We're doing T4 for speed. So speeds are 1 through 5. So 1 being the slowest, 5 being the fastest. I typically just pick T4 when we're doing like a capture the flag. If we need to run it really slow, I haven't encountered that, but you have speed options. T5 I've encountered to miss some things sometimes, but T4 has always been fine. The -A is for everything. So there's a lot of different options. I'm going to open up a new tab and I'll make this bigger for you guys. So if we just say nmap --help, you can see there are all kinds of options and switches in here. When we do -A, we're doing -all. What we're really looking for is versioning. So we are just trying to get OS detection, version detection, script scanning, etc. So what we're doing now is we're trying to get everything here. And then what we're saying is we're setting all ports. -p- is for all ports. We could also have defined ports. We could have said nmap port 443 or 80, etc., like that. But we're just going to go ahead and scan for all ports. If we didn't set a port, by default, it would scan, I think, the top 1,000 most common ports. But for every scan you do, you always want to check for all ports. You never know what's going to be out there in the top 1,000 while they're good, or you still can miss something. And the same goes for scanning for UDP as well. So right now we're scanning TCP. If we wanted to scan for UDP, which you should always scan for UDP, would be like this. So it'd be a lowercase s and an uppercase u. And then you would just repeat the process. Now, if you scan all ports on UDP, it's going to take forever. I recommend doing the top 1,000 for UDP, but again, if you've got time, it may actually just be worth it to go ahead and hit enter and scan all ports. For this lesson, we're not going to waste our time with that. There's nothing on UDP that we're going to be focusing on. Everything's going to be on the TCP side of scanning tonight. And if you're ever curious as well where your scan is at, you can hit a button. I just hit the up arrow, and it shows us at 99.88% done. So we're almost there. Sometimes they stall for a little bit. And you're saying it's redundant now? That's cool. I didn't know that, so that's a good thing to learn. And there's some other switches in there too. There's some other S's. I think SV is for versioning. Yeah, here's your scan techniques. So you got your different scans here. You've got your UDP scan, which we talked about. We have different types of scans, like the Christmas scans involved in this one. I don't ever use those. If you take like the CEH or something, they may question you on these kind of scans, but it's not that important. And let's check on our scan over here. Okay, we're done. So what we're going to be doing tonight is we're going to be going through this in terms of penetration testing. What we're going to do is we're going to look through and say, okay, not just how can we capture a flag or how can we break into the machine, but we're going to look in and say, okay, is that vulnerable, or should I be noting this if I was going to do a penetration test? So we're going to kind of go through all of these ports little by little and just go from there. So when we look at our scan, and what shows up here is it shows up what ports talked back when we sent that stealth scan. So we can see that SSH is open on port 22. And when we did the -A for all, we've got the versioning here, open SSH. And we've got port 80, so we've got HTTP. It looks like we have server information here. And it did some extra scanning with the -A as well. So it ran through some scripts, and it's kind of pulling down headers. It's giving us as much information as possible. We've got 111 for RPC, and we also got 139, which is pretty common. So this has a Samba share here. And 443 for Apache. And then the 1024 down here is tied into the RPC bind. So what we're going to do is I usually pick out what's the most interesting to me. And typically, like, you see SSH, and if you're doing like a capture the flag, usually like SSH might be a way in. Like, you're going to find creds somewhere else. You may find SSH to have like a default login or like a last resort kind of brute force in your way there. You could check the version on SSH to see if it's vulnerable, but typically you're looking at SSH more on the last side. I don't usually poke it first. Things that I like to poke first, especially for capture the flag side of things, is I always like to see what's out on the web pages, and Samba's always good. So SMB is always good as well, because there's so many SMB vulnerabilities out there. This is almost always an easy win when you're looking at those, especially like on older systems. So let's go ahead and we're going to just poke around at some of this stuff and see what kind of information we can find. So I'm going to open up a web browser to this port here for port 80. And here's what shows up. I've already gone ahead and done this, but if you just type in the IP address and hit enter, you're going to see that this is an Apache test page. So right off the bat, we have a vulnerability here, at least not a vulnerability, but at least a finding. This finding just signals that we have poor hygiene. So you don't want, if we're thinking about this on, say, an external site, and we navigate to this page and it's out on the web, if we see a test page, it makes us wonder, well, why do they have the server up? Is this server vulnerable? Why are they not running anything? So it just signals like if there's an IP address that's out there that has this default web page, well, then what else is going wrong in this environment, right? So if they're just leaving things like this out in the open, maybe they forgot to turn the port off when they turn the machine on. Maybe they didn't do patching for other things. So I'm going to make notes on the findings that we have here, and we're just going to say findings. So the first finding is we're going to say found default web page on port 80. So again, not a big finding, but if an attacker sees this, it may be something that indicates that there's poor hygiene. And if we do HTTPS, since we saw it on 443, we can also hit enter there. If you get this error, just add an exception, confirm it, and it's the same thing. So we can just say 443 and 80 here. Okay, so when we have a default page like this and there's nothing to really click on, what we're going to have to do is we're going to do a couple things. We can run Nikto on it, which is like a vulnerability scanner for web pages. And we can also run something like dirbuster or dirb, which is going to try to do directory busting. Basically, it's going to send a bunch of requests at this web page for well-known folders or directories in a web page and try to find extra things that are there. So I'll kind of show you both of those, and we can talk about them. But first, we're going to run Nikto. And best practice would suggest that we should run it on both 443 and port 80, and we can do that. So the syntax is pretty easy. It's just nikto-h for host. And we're just going to say 232.132 like this. And what this does is you can confirm you're seeing the target IP, you're seeing the target port of port 80 starting, and you just kind of come through here and you let it run, and it actually does a little directory busting for you down here. You can see it's finding the manual directory and icons, etc. But we're also going to be looking through some of this and seeing if any of this is interesting. So a lot of times this is just kind of fluff. But if we are doing, say we're doing a external assessment as opposed to a web application assessment. If I'm doing external, I might not care about these options headers here, like these headers up at the top. So those are things that I might mention in a vulnerability assessment for a web app. On the external side, if we really want to be nitpicky, like if this is like an application that's not going to have 20 findings or so on it, and we want to throw some fluff in here, this is kind of what I call it fluff. But on a web app, we definitely want to have these headers up there, but not important here. So we're going to go ahead and skip those in terms of findings. And then we see here some things are outdated: mod SSL, OpenSSL, Apache. These are all things that we're going to want to look into. Also, it shows you the HTTP methods. So we've got get, head, options, and trace. So HTTP trace, it's not something I would necessarily put on a pen test report unless I've already found cross-site scripting. So you can use cross-site scripting and trace to do cross-site tracing, which is XST. But you kind of need one to do the other. So typically trace isn't a big finding unless, again, you need something for fluff. But you'll see trace a lot. You're more interested if you see a method, like an HTTP method that's like put or like a delete, then we're talking something you want to report on, regardless if it's a web assessment or a external assessment. So then you come through here and you see that they're making recommendations on the versions that we're finding here. These versions are apparently vulnerable to different attacks. It doesn't mean that the exploit's going to be there. It just means that there's potential vulnerability. So it would be our job to go through and research our version of Apache, which came back as 1.3.20, and see what is going on here. So what we're going to do too is, if we're knowing that the server is Apache 1.3.20, okay, well, we're getting the header here somehow, right? And if we came back to our scan, it actually pulled the server header as Apache right here. So this would be a finding We can confirm that as well. We could do a curl on the head. If we just did something like this, curl dash dash head, and you said 192.168.232.132, this just returns the header response. And you see right here, server Apache 1.3.20. It's even given us Red Hat. So this is what's called information disclosure. And we don't want this. We don't want anybody knowing what kind of server we're running, what kind of operating system we're running, what kind of SSL we're running. This is all bad information we don't want out there, right? So it's really best practice to remove this header information from your server. It's also got e tags, which, again, this is kind of like a fluffy finding. I don't really ever put this on a finding. I see it a lot, but it's not something that you'd want on an external, really, unless you're really looking for fluff. But definitely on the information disclosure, this is useful for pen testers, for hackers. If you're finding this information, then what can we do with this information? We can look it up, right? We can see, okay, well, is there a well-known vulnerability for Apache 1.3.20 or this mod SSL, or we know they're on Red Hat. So like, what can we do with this information? And we're going to poke a little bit at this in a minute here. So we're going to go ahead and add that one to our finding here. We're going to say, okay, we found server header information disclosure. And that'll be true for port 80 and 443 as well. So it's best to just keep good notes as well. I like using Keep Note, and I just kind of break it into, here's the IP address that I'm scanning. What vulnerability did I find? What are some good things that I found about the server? Like, what's it doing right as well? So the better notes you have, the better pen tester you'll be. And like, you can go back and reference as well and say, yeah, I found this at this time on this site. Here's a picture to prove it. So they can't like call your bluff, like you want to have evidence to back up and kind of CYA, like cover your ass when you're doing these kinds of things as well. So we're going to also run dirbuster, and all you have to do is just type in dirbuster like this. I'm just going to show you for a proof of concept kind of how to run it. We're not going to really find anything, just kind of a heads up, but it's good best practice, just especially for like CTF. If I'm doing an external engagement and I've got a lot of hours and I don't have a lot of like IP addresses, I may poke the website to see, especially if it's a default page like this. I've found hidden directories on there. Because again, your mind comes to, why do they have this web page up? What are they doing? Maybe they have a hidden directory back there that they're using somewhere else, or they're using for themselves and don't want other people to know. Just bad practice. So I'll do this and just kind of poke around. But if I've got a lot of things to do, I won't do directory busting. I'll do it on a web app assessment for sure, but definitely not an external for doing that. So we've got this, and I always do go faster on the threading. And we could just use a basic list. I think they sit in, if you go to user, this may be hard to see, so I'm going to talk it out for you. It's user, share, and then you scroll over to the right all the way. You're looking for word lists. And there's a folder called dirbuster. And then you could pick your directory list. They've got a bunch in here. We're just going to go with small, just for proof of concept. So directory dash list dash lowercase dash 2.3 dash small. And it's already got the file extension set to PHP right here. We're going to start with the home directory, or the main first directory here. And we can just hit start on this guy and let that run. You can see pretty much right away it starts to pick up everything. We'll get like a tree view is where I like to come, because the scan information comes through so fast. You can come through here and just see what kind of information is. And finding like manual directories, probably not that interesting. Usage might be interesting. So depending on what's on these or in these directories might be additional information disclosure and findings as well. So I'm just going to let that run so we can talk about the other parts of the scan. So if we go back to our scan, so what we're going to be doing is we want to find information about Apache and about this mod SSL. We had the Nikto scan, which kind of gave us a little bit of information. It says Apache 1.3 is vulnerable to remote denial of service, possible code execution. And it says that it's also vulnerable to local buffer overflow and overflows and mod rewrites. Okay, so it looks like there's a lot of issues with this 1.3.20, and it looks like we've got issues with this mod SSL as well, which is a remote buffer overflow. We're really interested in that remote buffer overflow, which may allow remote shell. This might be the biggest money right here. So you kind of have to go through the vulnerabilities and say, okay, well, what's interesting, right? Well, denial of service, that's definitely a finding, but it's not something that's going to technically usually be in scope, right? Like a client's going to say, no, don't deny my service. You want to stay up while we're testing. So unless they give you a QA environment or something, but typically even in QA environments, denial of service isn't something you're going to be doing. So a local buffer overflow is local. And then you have overflows here in mod rewrite and mod CGI. It looks like we actually have to do something to those to get it to overflow. So what we'll do, it looks like this pause. Sometimes you run into errors and you just hit the unpause button here and it'll keep running with the Durbuster. What we're going to do is just do a little bit of research. So I'm going to kind of side panel this a little bit. I'll make this bigger just so I can read it. And what I would do here in this process is I would go to Google and I'd say, what's Apache 1.3.20 exploit? Okay, well, we've got the mod SSL that came up, which we talked about, that 2.8.7. We can look at some CVE details here. If this page loads, I think I went to it a couple days ago and it wasn't loading, so I don't know if they've got a cache version of it we can look at. Not pulling up. Okay, let's see. Apache, this one says 1.3.20 on exploit database. Let's take a look and see what this is. Root directory access. So you kind of got to go through like this and do your research. Okay, this page loaded. So you're looking for you're looking through these vulnerabilities and you really want to see something red. 7.5 is pretty high, but you kind of got to read through these and just kind of, do your research and see if there's anything that would be applicable. And this look like they may take some time to actually go through and do. So, and it tells you the vulnerability type. Like this looks like privesc. This is denial of service. Again, we're not really into denial of service. Cross-site scripting, that's a good find, especially like on a web app. Code overflow. Really, we want like a buffer overflow if we're going to try to get a remote shell. So what we're going to be doing is looking also at what we just kind of hinted and found up here was this Apache mod SSL. So that'd be the other thing that we'd look at. Would be mod SSL 2.8.7 is what we came up with right here. And yeah, naughty words, open fuck. It is what it is. This is for learning purposes, right? So it tells you about the exploit and what version it's for. So less than 2.8.7. We are on 2.8.4. Actually, apologize. 2.8.4 to 2.8.7. Let's see where we're at. Could have that wrong. 2.8.4. So we're less than 2.8.7 is what showed up. And this does a remote buffer overflow. So this is something that we may be interested in finding here. I'm going to go ahead and minimize that. We might want to look into this vulnerability. So what we'll do for our findings is we're going to say, okay, Apache 1.3.0, we'll say multiple vulnerabilities, and we'll kind of indicate those when we write a report, what those vulnerabilities are, right? We'll say, okay, well, there's vulnerability for denial of service, for local buffer overflow. We don't have to get too specific. We just have to describe and say, okay, these are the vulnerabilities that could happen. We could try these ones and see if they work. As a pen tester, you might, but you got to be kind of sure that it's going to work. And we'll also notate that mod SSL on top of that. And we said we're on 2.8.4, has remote buffer overflow vulnerability. So these are both require patching, right? So what we're going to do is say port 8443. I'm going to set this aside for now. I kind of want to touch base on the other things before we get into exploiting. We may, as a pen tester, if you find something like this looks juicy to me, right? I may just fire off my exploit right now. This is kind of the thing. I'll do my research, make sure it works, would work on this, and then you're going to fire off your exploit. And if we get a reverse shell or a shell on this machine, in a pen test term, everything stops. At least where I work, everything stops. Like, if I can exploit you from the external side of the house, I am calling you up immediately and saying, hey, this is what just happened. A, do you want me to go further? Do you want me to keep going? Or B, do you want to like patch this right now? Because I'm probably not the first person that's come across this. So you want to make sure that the client knows if you find a critical vulnerability right away. If you find like a potential critical, it's not something that necessarily they need to know about. It's more of, hey, I just got in from the outside. You have to do something about this right now. So before we attack this, I just kind of want to go on and list out some more vulnerabilities, and then we'll go over the different exploits that are possible, and we'll call it a day from there. So it looks like we still have 30 minutes on this machine. Okay, so if we go back into Nmap here, we've got a couple other things. So what we're trying to do is we're really just doing service enumeration. So we've kind of looked into this Apache, right? We've also looked into this version, or we can look into this version, I should say, of OpenSSH. That would be a quick one. You just say, hey, Google, does this have an exploit? And a lot of times you type it in, you're going to see exploit after the word just to see if you could find it. Nothing glaring comes up right away. So you stop after the exploitation. Unless there's something in your rules of engagement or your scope that says you cannot exploit, in which you would just be doing a vulnerability assessment, like a scan as opposed to an actual like engagement. So you exploit that sucker and then you tell them. Like, you don't want to go to them and say, hey, it's possible. You want to say, hey, I just got in and somebody else probably has too. So going back to this, if we look at the vulnerabilities, denial of service for a few of them, information vulnerabilities, there's a bypass. Here's a 9.3. This is the red we're talking about. This says denial of service as well, so we're not going to do that. Execute code overflow might be interesting, right? A 10 here. So it looks like this one came out in 2016. So some things we can do here, if we're interested, is we can use a tool called SearchSploit. And I'm just going to paste it, but I'm going to back it off. I'll show you why I'm backing this off. So if I just hit enter on SearchSploit like this, no results. It's very specific. Even if I did 2.9, very specific, right? So what SearchSploit's doing is it's kind of searching for already known vulnerabilities. If I do 2 point and let that run, then you can see these are already vulnerabilities that actually reside on your computer, like the codes in the script for it. So you have exploit DB. Here's what it's searching through. And you got the user share exploit DB. It also has Metasploit modules in here occasionally. So it's very, very handy for a quick search. Google's definitely handy as well. So I usually use both. If I can't find anything in SearchSploit, I'll go to Google and search as well. So it is 2.9, and I'm not seeing anything right off rip. I'm not seeing anything as well in terms of like exploit DB having anything. We have this 10 out of 10 code execution here, and that may be true, but we may have to meet some sort of parameters. I'm not sure if the site's going to work because we're on web cache. We may have to meet certain specific parameters, and there may be no code for it. It just could be that it's reported and out there and acknowledged, but that there's no code out there for you to actually run unless you develop your own 0-day for it. So just because you see the red's a good start, the red doesn't mean that it's going to be exploitable on your end. So we can note that if we think it's a vulnerability. At this point, I don't know if it's a vulnerability. Nothing's coming up. I mean, it definitely has some vulnerabilities here. It may be worth seeing if there's a later version that patches and reading about this. I don't know if there's patching in here. Updates. Yeah, so it says that there's an update. It looks like 2016 for it. I don't know if that's applying to an update for the patch or what. How do you release a 0-day? I don't know. I've never done that. Either if you, okay, are we talking ethically or not ethically? So if you do it ethically, you're going to be contacting companies, say, hey, I found this. You should patch this. And you say, like, please let me know. Like, that's your initial opening conversation. Some of them will tell you, hey, go fuck off. Other people will be nice and say, okay, let's get this resolved. Usually you keep it private, right? You say, let's work together, do it, whatever. And company will give you full credit for finding the vulnerability once they patch it and have a release for the patch. So typically you go through a long process. It could take up to a year from when you find a vulnerability. But you know, some people are like, if you're a hacker, you might say you have 30 days to fix this. Some people are like that, right? And they say, if you don't fix it in 30 days, then I'm releasing it. So, and then there's people that sell them. So if you have a, like the next SMB WannaCry vulnerability, then you're probably making quite a bit of money off of that. So we're going to just back shelf this one. We may notate, depending on the latest version of OpenSSH that's out there, we may notate that they should be OpenSSH updating. Let's see what version they're on. They're on 7.9, and we were looking at 2 point something. So yeah, that's probably a finding. So we could just say OpenSSH 2.9, whatever it was. I don't know what it was. There you go. Out of date. And then we can address some of the vulnerabilities that we find, but this would be a finding. So 0 days, it is a gray line. It depends. Like, are you finding it like in software? Because if you have software and you're breaking it down and you're figuring it out, that's just you doing research. If you're openly attacking a website, that's a gray line. So people who report vulnerabilities on websites or databases, things like that, that becomes a huge gray area. Because a lot of companies will be like, well, why were you poking around in the first place, you know? So okay, and the thing we would do too, if we're doing an assessment, a lot of times, I'll just notate this, we're not going to do it, run a brute force attack. For two reasons here. The first reason being we want to see if we can just brute force root with, you know, a pretty easy password, like a bottom 500, bottom 1,000 password. It doesn't have to be like a long brute force attack. We're trying to see, can we break in with something really easy? If so, then, okay, you need to update your passwords and your complexity, your rule sets for them, the length for them, etc. The second reason is you want to attack the SIM and see if at any time, especially when you're doing your scanning, brute force attacks, is the blue team seeing my attacks? Are they seeing that I'm running a brute force? Are they seeing that I'm running Nessus or Nmap or Nikto, etc.? You want to be in communication with the IT manager of whoever you're attacking, and as soon as they see something going on, then they tell you, right? So it's key to run like these sorts of like just attacks to see how good or bad their SIM is. So brute force attack, how often would we run it? Maybe once an engagement. It just depends. Like if you're desperate, like say if you're doing password spraying or something like that, you might run it against every account you find for Outlook. Outlook's a good way in, just doing password spraying, credential stuffing, etc. So if I'm getting nowhere on external, but they've got Outlook and I know a lot of their email addresses or usernames, then I'm going to start spraying passwords and do a last heave ditch effort. Because Outlook by nature does user enumeration too, based on like a time response. So if I can get user enumeration, know what valid users are, and then really start doing attacks, like if they've got known passwords out there for have I been pwned, or if they've got like, winter 2019 exclamation would be a really good one. So I'll just kind of run through some passwords. Password 1's a good one. You just kind of throw them out there, see what sticks, and if it sticks, maybe they have a VPN you can log into and gain access. We could do PowerShell Empire Q&A afterwards as well. I don't want to get too sidetracked. And yes, we are still enumerating at this point. So everything's enumeration, enumeration, enumeration. Even if you break in, you're still enumerating. That's like the number one thing. Exploits are just a little bit of it. So we've looked at 22, we've looked at 80, we've looked at 443. There's one other thing for 443 I want to show you guys. So if you see here with these SSL version 2, the ciphers, this would be a finding right here. And we're going to go into a little more detail. Let me copy it over because I've already got it written out. Okay, and I'll explain this. I won't just blindly paste this. Okay, so we're going to be running an Nmap script here. And this is SSL Enum ciphers on port 443. So this script specifically looks for the ciphers that it finds and gives them a rating from A to F. What's that font size hotkey? For me, it's Control A. You can go in and set it. It's like Control++, which I had no idea what the hell that meant. It didn't work for me. Preferences, shortcuts? Yeah, shortcuts, Control A. That's what I set it. And we hit enter here. Oh, got to set an IP address. 192.168.232.132. I don't remember anything, man. I'm going to show you a trick, though. Say I know that I want to run this Nmap script, and I know that it has to do with SSL, right? I could say history grep SSL. And then I'll say, oh, look, I ran that on another client or another instance, and here it is. And I just copy it, paste it, add the new IP address. I still have no idea what that means. Buckstick. I guess I'm slow. Like a combo. I try Control++ like a combo. It didn't work for me. Control Shift. You guys are going to have to teach me. I'm slow. So, when you come through here, let's see. So we've got this enumeration, right, for SSL. And hopefully that helped you. Like, if I wanted to find this SSL again, I just go into my history. I do have a notebook and stuff of like my commands that I run, or I Google all the time. I forget commands all the time. There's just too much to remember. So don't worry about like memorizing. Just remember, like in your head, say, oh man, there's that script out there that Nmap does that helps me with this assessment. Yeah, Google Foo is correct. I Google everything. So if we come through here, and this box is from like 2010, so it's going to happen. But you come in on 443 and you look at the rating A through F. You could scroll right down to the bottom and see the least strength is F. We want to see these at A's, right? So they're running with all these vulnerable to different ciphers here, and it says what they're vulnerable to, what attacks. And if you run a Nessus scan, this will blow up your Nessus scan. So typically what we do for assessments, if we see this, what we're doing is we're making like a chart. And we're saying, okay, well, you're vulnerable to the Suite 32 attack. You're vulnerable to Poodle, whatever these cipher attacks are. It'll come up in Nessus. This is more of like a, I don't even know. This is probably, depending on the severity, an F might be pretty bad. But like typically you'll see like a C. And a C is like a medium vulnerability on the level. Typically you have to be like a man in the middle for this attack. Even if it's on the external, you have to somehow get in the middle of this, right? And then you can do one of these attacks. They're not easy, so the likelihood's not that high. So that's why they're typically mediums, even if you find them. But nonetheless, weak ciphers are 100% of finding. So we'll say weak ciphers, and we'll say port 443. Okay. This is a VM. This is a VM running on VMware Pro. Okay, so far we've got 2280.443 done. We have found questionable exploit for mod SSL with the naughty words, as you guys would say. So we're going to go ahead and look at a couple more here. We're going to do the RPC, which covers 111, and it covers 1024. So this is a remote procedure call. This is used by SMB to make procedure calls. There's some interesting information that you can find, especially if you're on like if you are on a Windows domain. And the way to enumerate is with RPC client. So you could say RPC client, provide a username. And if you knew a username and password here, you would provide the SMB username. And then you do the address, 192.168.232.132, hit enter. It's going to ask for a password. You hit enter, no password. That means we just got in with a null session. So that's a finding. We'll immediately notate that. Null session on RPC. So we'll call that, what, port 111? There used to be a tool called Enum for Linux that ran through all this, like this, Enum for Linux. It has been broken forever, so it used to run through SMB and RPC. I don't usually play around in here too much. I've got some commands. I mean, if you type in help, the commands are ridiculous. There's all kinds of information in here that you can look through and try to find that is provided to you by the server. Let me see, like server info is one of them. This. Yes, SMB client's good, and we're going to talk about that here in a second. So you got server info, Samba server. What's another one that I had? Net share, enum. So this tells you what shares are running on this null session. Looks like IPC and admin. And if we control C out of here, what was mentioned was RPC client. You could do like a -L like this and just try to connect to the server. So if you say 192.168.232.132, if it works. See if it wants a couple more forward slashes or whatever these are. Access denied. Oh, because I used RPC client. Meant SMB client. I'm sorry, guys. So you can come in here and you can see that we just got a null session to SMB as well. So what we're trying to do is connect to the SMB server is all we're doing with this SMB client. And you see we got the share information. We still don't have a service on the Samba server. We don't know what kind of SMB it's running, so we need to figure that out. And you get a server name. It's called Kioptrix. Samba server, part of my group, work group. So not a lot of information here. You can try to connect to these share names. Like if you're doing like admin $, something like this, and see if it lets you in. But a lot of times you're going to get access denied. But what's important here is to enumerate, because we haven't found, where is it? We have not found specifically what version we're on. It just says Samba 139, and that's it. So there's a tool I'm going to show you, since we can't use Enum for Linux, and sometimes SMB client shows you the server type for Samba, but we're going to go ahead and use Metasploit. Yeah, I've never used my Security Plus cert. I think it was good. Like when I worked in government, it was good. But if you're not doing US 8570, I don't know how it works overseas, but 8570 is a good reason to have it. Same with the CEH. But other than that, I don't know how useful it ends up being. On the entry side, maybe it helps you land a job. I'm not going to like badmouth it by any means, but so with Metasploit loaded, we're going to say search. We're just going to search for SMB. I'm going to show you how this works. So SMB is going to have a ton of stuff. Don't get overwhelmed by this. So we have different types of SMB here, or different types of Metasploit module groupings, I should say. I'm sorry. Auxiliary is more like if you're your pre-exploit. It's like your scanning, your informational is how I like to think of it. You've got exploit, which you see the exploit group here, which breaks down into the certain exploits by type, so Windows, Linux, etc. And then you've got post, you've got payloads as well. Post is after you've exploited, you run some of these things. So post informational, pre-informational, exploit. What we're looking for is we know we want to scan and find what we're going to be doing. We're trying to find the SMB version. So what we're really looking for is an auxiliary, and we're looking for a scanning auxiliary. So it actually breaks down, if we keep going, auxiliary, scanner, and then SMB, and we're looking for SMB version right here. So copy this. And what we'll say is let's put use, and we can paste that. And I'll give you guys a second if you're typing this out if you didn't find it as fast. But it's auxiliary, scanner, SMB, SMB underscore version, and you can tab through that as well. It's autocomplete. So you say use, and then the first thing you should do pretty much when you come in here is you could say either info and find out the info. I like to do that if I'm not sure if I find an exploit or something in Metasploit and I don't know if it's particularly for what I'm looking for, like a service. A lot of times you can come in here and it'll give you information. It'll say it's for this service, but you have to have this, this, and this applied. And then you can kind of like verify that that's going to work or not. So you can also just type in options, which is the smaller version, kind of just what you see here. And so the R host, that's the remote host that we want to connect to. So it's going to be the IP address. So we're going to say set R host 192.168.232.132. And that's all that's required. We don't have to set a domain, user, and pass. And remember that we had null session here, so we actually don't have to do any of that. All we could type in is run, or you can type in exploit if you want to feel cool. And you see it says host cannot be identified, but it did identify that we're running Unix, and we're running Samba 2.2.1a. So let's go ahead and copy that guy. And we're going to say Google, sir, or ma'am, depending on your Google gender. You're going to say Samba 2.2.1a exploit. You've got a few in here. Looks like there's one called trans2 open that runs for versions 2.2.0 to 2.2.8. This one's 2.2.x. This one's less than 2.2.8. This is trans2 open Perl version. And we've also got the trans2 open, looks like this is in C. So we've got a few options here. We can download and run this, which we're going to do. We can also go ahead and try our hand at Metasploit. So I'll show you the easy way, and then we'll cover the little bit harder way. So what we're going to do also, if you wanted to search exploit on that 2.2.1a, I don't know if it's going to come up. And this is where it gets tricky, because see, look, there's so many things. You could say Samba. You kind of have to like try to narrow it down as best as you can. This is why I like Google a little bit over search exploit. But we could see this trans2 open for Metasploit here. And they've got it for a few different things. So look, BSD, Linux, OS X, Solaris, so different operating systems. Let's go ahead and go back to Metasploit here. And so we're going to be searching for that. We're going to search for trans2 open. And I believe we've gotten through all of the enumeration before we just start exploiting. I'm pretty sure we hit all the boxes here. Just want to double check. Yeah, we've covered all the ports. Okay, so we're going to hop into exploits. We've got 9 minutes on this box. We'll probably do some questions afterwards just to do it. Let's see. So we're going to do options on... Actually, sorry, ahead of myself. So we see the exploit here, and we know we're on Linux. We're running Red Hat, right? We saw that in the scan. So what we're going to do is we're just going to copy this guy. We're going to say use, paste. Again, options. So it has everything pretty much filled out for you. We're going to say set our host. We're going to set it to that IP address. And we're going to run this. Now this is going to break. It's not going to work, and I'll show you why. Okay, so Control C when you do this, or don't even run it if you don't want to. What's happening here is we're getting an interpreter session open. That means we have shell access, but then immediately it dies. So something's wrong, right? We're getting an exploit to work, but the exploit's dying. So we know there's a vulnerability. We know there's an exploit. We just got to figure out how to fix that. So if we go back into options, we have this payload that it provides to us by default. This Linux x86 interpreter reverse TCP. The first thing I would think of is changing this payload. So if you're having issues, perhaps you're running the wrong payload. There's something called staging, which we're not going to get into now, but imagine there's a slash here in between instead of an underscore. What this is doing is just sending it all at once, but you can stage it to send it in iterations. So if you're staging, you might run non-staged, and that may change the payload type, get it working. So what we can use is we can do a set payload, and it's generic Linux, I believe. Nope, that's not it. I never remember. There we go. Generic. We're just going to do shell reverse TCP, kind of like that. And then you want to look at your options again. Sometimes when you go in and you change the payload, it'll take out your L host, which is your host. That's your local host. And the L port, the listening port, or the listening host, I guess is what this would be. So you want to make sure that they're in there, but they're in there. So let's go ahead and just try running this again. And now we have a session. So we could say, who am I? And you could say host name. We have rooted this machine. We don't have to do any privesc. We don't have to do any lower level stuff. We are full root. So from this point, I'm not going to cover a lot of post enumeration. We're going to do that later. I'm already stretching this hour. I didn't know how long this is going to take. And since this is the first video, I don't want to go too late and bore you guys. But what we're going to do, like if I'm on this Linux machine, the first thing I want to see if I'm root, I want to dump the hashes of the passwords, right? So like you're going to get the Etsy shadow. Okay, so we've got a root hash here. We've got John, Harold down here. So in between, there's these users. These are like system users, right? And then you see like real users down here at the bottom, and they're kind of grouped. So you see the 0 here. Actually, it's a little different in this. This is an older version of Linux. $1, $1. I don't even know what hashing that is. You'd have to find it out through Hashcat, because Callie's on like $6 or something now. So what you can do with this information is you can like unshadow it. You would cat the Etsy password file. You combine these two files. You'd run it through Hashcat, etc., and try to break these passwords. So is Callie Shah 256 anymore? $6? I feel like it's 512. I could be wrong. Prove me wrong. $6 hash. Shah 512. Let's see what MD5 is. $1. It looks like MD5 crypt 3. So older hashing. So we would combine these. We'd figure out which setting for Hashcat's MD5, and we'd try to crack these hashes. We might not crack the root hash if the root hash is incredibly long password, but we still might be able to get John or Harold, and maybe John or Harold are an admin on the domain controller. You never know. So this is the kind of information you want. You want to find ARP. No ARP command on this box? Okay, no ARP command on this box, but typically you want to look at ARP. It might be a different command. Sorry, guys. You want to look at the route. It might be IP route. I never remember all these. You also want to look at the netstat. That worked. We found one that worked. So with netstat, you're trying to see like what addresses you're connecting to, if that makes sense, and what ports are going out. So kind of I'm looking for what other computers does this talk to? What other ports? Why are these ports open? Do I see a different subnet in here on a network? You know, is there a 233 that I'm seeing? Like, is this dual homed, this computer? So, you know, like this may be your area where you want to pivot out and move into a different network. This may be the one box that's going to let you do that. So you kind of have to look for those pivot points. That's the same thing with what ARP is doing. So netstat, the route as well. And you just kind of want to see what information's there. Of course, if you're looking around and you've got time, so with penetration tests, it's all about time, right? Like how much hours am I allowed to hack for? Like if I only have, 40 hours for 1,000 machines or something, it depends how big the network is. I'm probably dumping the hashes. I'm probably doing a quick look at this netstat or whatever, and I'm moving on. If I have just a few machines or I'm really, really trying, like say I've got the IT guy's computer, I'm not root on the domain, but I know the IT guy might have some valuable information or passwords on this machine, you bet I'm going through his files. I might be going through his emails. I might be trying to find whatever, because nothing's off limit unless it's not in the scope, Typically, I'm allowed to look through files, look through emails, etc. So these are kind of things you just want to search out for in terms of a post exploitation, especially once you're already root or system on the Windows side. Okay, so I want to kill this. We're going to Control-C, kill this session. We are going to do our own now. We're going to do our own exploit. So what we're going to do is, I picked up one of these, if you guys are following along. There's exploit database exploits 10. This guy, I don't know if I can zoom. I can't zoom in on the stupid bar, but it's this guy, if you were following along. And we're going to just say git clone like this and hit paste. We're going to download this file. We'll wget, sorry. Or we could just download the file. Let's cat that to make sure I did that right. I don't usually use this method. You know what? Screw it. That might not be right. How about this? You just hit the download button and save the file. Pen test for work? No. So it depends. So if you're meaning black box, like I have no information going in, a lot of the times, yeah. So it just depends on the client, what they want you to know. So a lot of times it's more of like gray, especially if it's a repeat client. Like if it's a repeat client, a lot of times they're going to want to know what information has changed, right? Like have they patched what you've done before? So you kind of have to cheat and look at the report and say, okay, well, this was there last time. I'm going to go check this, especially if it's like easy win. So you're going to go check for the old report, check through that. You're going to do your own scans, look through it again. So a lot of times on repeats, it's more gray. There's gray sometimes when they like have to tell you information about the network, but most of the time it's like, here's these IP addresses, especially on an external, here's these IP addresses, go try to get your way in. And I'm going to CD to the downloads folder in LS, and there's the 10.1c. I've already had this downloaded, obviously. But what we're going to do is I always like to change the mode. I don't know if this does anything for compiling, but I always do it. So change your mode, +X 10C. So all we're doing is making this read write, or we're making this executable, sorry. You could see here that this new download that we just did was not executable. This one is executable. And then all we're going to do is compile this with a tool called GCC, called 10.c. You're going to put an output, and I already called one trans to open. We'll just call this 10 just for fun. Then you ls. And then 10 comes out already, +X. That's why it's green. You are correct. It definitely does have the exploits already. We could have search exploited, like he just mentioned, we could have search exploited trans to open, and that /10 would be in here. You'd have to find the right one, but it would be one of these. Hey, see you later, Orbital. Thanks for watching as long as you did, man. So yeah, you could search through these and see if they're installed. What we're going to do now, though, is we've already downloaded it. So whatever you called it, if we called it 10, and it's executable, which is important now. We're going to say ./10, just hit enter. We can read the code and see what's in the code. But also, I should note that, actually, like when you come through here on this code, it's always good to read it before you go running the code. Like it tells you the information here. It says how to run it. And it provides information. Sometimes like you have to come in here and you have to change something. You might have to change an IP address out. You might have to change out the shell code. So it's always good to read it and read through it. I just kind of jumped the gun on that. Sorry, guys. But with that being said, we come in here and it tells you what options do you want and what IP address are we using, right? It's what it looks like. So we're going to say $10, and then you're going to say what's it wants a -B for platform. We're running Linux, so it's 0. Let's see if this is the right syntax. Okay. So it's as simple as that. And you say, who am I? Host name. And again, we're root and Kioptrix level 1 for the host name. So very similar. And to save on time, I'm just going to talk you guys through the other one. So the other one was OpenFuck, the naughty. It's this mod SSL 2.8.4. When we searched that earlier, we found it. I'm just going to Google OpenFuck. This script is actually broken. I'll show you where to find it if you want to play around with this. Give me 1 second. So exploit ID 764. And I think I said OpenFuck fixed. This might be at OpenLuck. So this is a fixed version, this OpenLuck. If you come in here, you just download this and compile it. Follow the instructions, because it looks like you need to git clone this. You need to apt-get this SSL library, and then you compile it, just how it says it, and it works. But I'll let you guys do that on your own for practice. And we're going to be moving on here in just a second. So for those of you that don't have HackTheBox, you're just going to have to follow along. If you haven't figured your way out in yet, you're going to have to kind of do that on your own. I'm not going to be able to help you. But if you're persistent, it's not really that tough. It's just some web enumeration and some Googling. Google what you find, Google what you see, and it won't be that hard. We were going to be doing active, so I got a request for you guys, actually. I'm going to come into here. Active would be way more fun than Jerry. Jerry's going to be a very beginner. If you guys aren't like brand new, even if you are brand new, I think active would be more fun. But Jerry's still informative because you do see Tomcat, which is what we're going to be doing in real life quite a bit. So if you come into HackTheBox and you click on retired on the side, so last week when I announced the box active was in this list, active is no longer in the list. As of Sunday, they retired it from retirement. Now I can access it because I have VIP access. However, if you don't have VIP access, which I'm assuming a lot of you don't, then we can't access it. So my request for you guys is to come in here and find active and hit the upvote button on it. So that way we can attack it next week if you want to. If not, we'll pick something else out and do it. But it's really fun. It's Active Directory. It's why it's called active. There's some cool features to it, and it's kind of realistic with a lot of things that I see on assessments. So for those of you that are even OSCP or doing your OSCP right now, you're not going to see a lot of Active Directory stuff on there. So definitely a cool little lesson just into Active Directory and that machine. So upvote it if you can. But we're going to be working on Jerry. Jerry is probably one of the easier boxes that has been on HackTheBox. but like I said, still a pretty valuable lesson. So if this is your first time and you have a login, what you need to do is click on Access over here. You're going to download your Access, your OVPN file. And what we're going to do is connect with that OVPN file. So I'm going to Control C. I think my file's in here. Yep. So OpenVPN, Maverick.ovpn. And sorry, I just saw the chat. I don't know the fake SSH one. You might have to actually teach me that one. Teach me how to hack, please. I need it. Okay, once you see initialization sequence completed, that means you are connected to the VPN and you can start hacking HackTheBox. What we're going to be doing, I'm going to open a new window. And just do an ifconfig, make sure we're on there. Please don't attack me right now. But 10.10.14.36. And what we're going to do is we're going to make sure the box is up, which we're sitting at 95. Looks like we're getting a ping response. So remember, if you came in here, it's sitting at 95. Okay, so let's go ahead and Nmap this. Same thing. We're gonna try the method. We're not gonna use the stealth scan built in by default, right? So we're gonna try it. T4, all ports, and 10.10.10.95. So look at that. See, you're teaching me new things today, man. I like it. I'm looking through your fake exploit. I'll have to look at it. Okay, so while this goes on, the scan's going to take maybe a minute or two. You guys have any questions? We're going to do a Q&A afterwards. This one's not going to take nearly as long as the other one. This is kind of a last-second addition. So I will take any questions while we got it. And also maybe drink time. I've been talking a lot. Okay, so money. Senior penetration tester. So it depends. Like, is a senior really a senior? Are you a consultant that everybody's a senior? I'll say this. So junior level, you can expect anywhere from 70. I've seen beginning salaries to 130. This is US dollars, 70 to 130,000. That all depends on location, luck, talent, etc. Company, you know. So I would call it an average of 100,000. As you get into the senior level, the sky is more the limit. 130 is pretty much I would say the going rate right now. That doesn't mean that people aren't making more than 130, and more talented people are making way more than that. If you're in management, you're probably in the 150 to 160. Possibly even above that, right? And if you start your own firm, same thing. So it wildly varies, especially depending on location. So if you're working remote and you live in a low-cost living area, some of these jobs can pay incredibly well compared to where you're living. The last box that I got into, or said was AD, is called active. And let's see. So you guys asked, would it be worth learning Ruby? Yes. Learning Ruby, understanding to read Ruby is fine. Only because sometimes the exploits don't have a Metasploit module, and if you can port it over to Metasploit, awesome. There's a tutorial out there on how to do that, actually. That would be the one benefit of knowing Ruby, in my opinion. And also, sometimes the Metasploit modules are broken. There was one I did, Fighter, on HackTheBox, where the Metasploit module was broken, and I had to edit the Metasploit module to actually work. So I have no idea why it's written in Ruby while we're on the topic. We can save career questions and everything else as we go, but I was an accountant before I got in the industry, got into IT 3 years ago, not that long ago, but we can talk about that. And my first interview was not OSCP, here you go. It was more like OSCP, congratulations, good job, pat on the back. What else do you know? So the OSCP just gets you in the doors, and managers aren't really impressed by it that much, if you want honesty. It's more of a, okay, I know you can get through that, but you need some more knowledge. And we could talk about that. We can go in depth on that. So back to this, and then we'll answer your questions when we're done with this one. So what we're doing here, we only have one port up. This is fun. We got one port. And if we're looking right away, we see that the server is giving out a header of Apache Tomcat. Regardless of what we find, we already know from our last one that server header information disclosure is a finding. So we are definitely at a finding already, right? So we know we're running Apache Tomcat. We can look up Apache Tomcat 7.0.88 and see if there are any vulnerabilities for that. Same thing with this Apache Coyote 1.1. But similar to last time, what I like to do is I like to navigate out to the page, which I've done. I'm going to go ahead and refresh it. And also what I like to do is run Nikto on the page, similar to what we did last time. So we're going to say this is 10.10.10.95 and port 8080, like that. Okay, so same thing as last time. You're getting these headers coming up, right? Fluff. They're just fluff. I mean, if we're doing a web app, if this is like a web app here, again, for those of you that missed it, then yeah, we're including these because these need to be there for your web app. If we're doing an external assessment and we've got a bunch of hosts, unless we're not finding anything, this is just fluffy stuff. So we've got allowed methods here. What did we talk about before? We talked about put. That's a bad boy. Delete. It's a bad boy. You don't want those ever allowed on your server. So that would be an instant finding as well. So, I mean, we can just write these out for Jerry here. So we found server header information disclosure, port 80443. And we found insecure allowed methods, is what we can call it, for put and delete. Oh no, this is not port 80 and 443, sorry. This is 8080. Port 8080. And we'll see what else comes up here. Same thing, we could do dirbuster on this, but since you already saw it once, I'm not gonna repeat it because it's not part of the actual hack this time. But you would run dirbuster in a typical situation, or dirb, or your favorite dirbusting tool, and try to see what other web pages are possibly out there. So we're given this page, and this is also a no-no. This is the big finding. One of the big findings is you've got a Apache Tomcat, basically an admin panel login page, right? You got the server status, manager app, host manager right here. And this is something that you would not want exposed internally or externally. I mean, you have it internally. If you have it internally, you want this to be on like a dev environment or a dev VLAN, and you want this segmented away from everybody else. You want only the people who need to be able to access this to be able to have a chance to log into this, let alone try to exploit it. But you have a Apache Tomcat login up and running on your external. This is the no-no. So we don't want any login interfaces on the external if we can avoid it, especially for a server. So when we come in here and we say like host manager, it's going to ask us for a username and password. As a penetration tester, what you're going to do is you're going to say, okay, well, I will go out and I'll Google what are the default username and passwords. A lot of times there's like Tomcat. You try that. and you can come in and say default Tomcat credentials. Actually, I pulled it up already. There's this GitHub here that has them. And there's a tool in Metasploit that we can use where we can paste this information in. There's actually already a tool out there, I believe, that has that pushes default credentials like this already out to Tomcat. So there's a bunch of different methods that we could use. But something that if we just read and we look through, so we got a 401 unauthorized. We're not authorized to access it. But it gives us an example. Now, it could have a default lockout, but we're working with the vulnerable machine. So you could attempt that, but then again, like, you want your default lockout, it's tricky, right? You want it to be at a certain point. Is it 5? Is it 5 attempts? And how long does it lock out for? Because if you have an admin account, and then I go in there and I say, okay, admin, and then I lock the admin account out, now I'm denying service, right? So it's a really tricky to have lockouts, and it's hard to suggest lockouts, but you want them to be after so many and for a certain period of time. Maybe it's even 5 minutes, but still, with the lockout, you're going to be denying service. So always something to think about. And also another thing to look out for, if you see this, just scroll through. It found default credentials automatically with Nikto. So Nikto is a vulnerability scanner. It is doing some things behind the scenes. And one of the things it's doing is checking for default credentials. Another thing I was going to point out is it tells you for this version what kind of default credentials it might be expecting. Tomcat secret. So we already know we can try that. Tomcat secret. Denied. What's going on? So let's try it again here. Are vault scanners good to use in a real pen test scenario? So pen test, yes. Red team, no. So when we talk about pen testing, you're talking about them knowing that you're going to be doing it anyway, right? So you're going to be running a vuln scanner, or you're going to be running, whatever it is, your Nessus or your Nmap, and so I mean, it is what it is. They're gonna know, but you'd be surprised how many people don't actually find that you're scanning the network. It's not as many as you'd hope. Let's see here. Tomcat secret. We may have to log into one location first. Okay. So we had to log into the manager. Sorry. So we logged into this web application manager. Yeah, I could touch on red teaming and pen testing when we're done with this. It won't be much longer on this one. So there is something with Tomcat that if you were to search, you pretty much find it. If you just say Tomcat exploits, okay, well, one of the things that is common for a Tomcat exploit is it gives you this opportunity or this option to upload a file. It's called a war file. And if you see these paths here, these are war files. They're just basically the little sites that we're accessing. Like we're accessing the manager area, right? So what we can do is deploy a war file that's malicious and hosts up a connection. Like what we'll do, and this is called the reverse shell. We're gonna set up a listener. We're gonna set up a listener with the tool using Netcat, and we're gonna listen on a port. We're gonna use 4444, and I'll show you that in a second. Once we listen on that port, we're gonna create something malicious, upload it, and deploy it. And that malicious thing is gonna say, "Hey, I want you to connect back to this port on this IP address," and create a shell. That's called a reverse shell, when you have a victim connect back to you. So if you connect to a victim, then it is a bind shell. You may be asked that on a pen test interview at some point in your life. Okay, so I can never remember the syntax for war file, but there is a MSF Venom, which we'll cover in a second. Say MSF Venom war file. And I like this Security Geek cheat sheet, if this is the one I'm thinking of, that has all the different payloads. Hey, there you go. So MSF Venom is a shellcode generator, also creates malware. You'll use this a lot if you're doing like capture the flag, or even if you're doing like a malware assessment, you may use this, or if you just need a quick shell, you may use this as well doing pen tests. But if we come down here to web-based payloads, you see this reverse shell. Actually, we used one of these on an assessment yesterday, and it worked just fine. So I'm not going to copy this. I'm just going to type this in. Actually, you guys might not be able to see that. Let me zoom in. Okay, so it's this war reverse shell right here. So what it's saying is MSF Venom, that's the tool. We're going to use a payload of Java, JSP shell reverse TCP. That's just a reverse shell in Java. The L host is the listening host, which we kind of covered in Metasploit. L port, listening port. So that's going to be our IP address and that port that we talked about with Netcat. The file type is going to be a war file, and then you can save it as whatever you want to call it. That's what this little bracket is here. And let's type that in. Actually, I'm going to copy and paste some of this. Okay, so we have that. We're going to say lhost equals where you're at, 192.168.232.142, I believe. Let's double check that. Oh no, sorry, we're at this address. 14.36. Use your address for your HackTheBox VPN. Sorry, guys. And then the L port, we're just going to use 4444. That's standard for Metasploit and for other connections. It does get picked up a lot by IDS, IPS, but we're just going to use it for example here. And then we need the file type of war. And then we're going to save it out. And they called it reverse. We can call it reverse as well. .war. That should take just a second. And we put that in root. So we'll have to remember that. Okay, so we're in the manager. We go browse for our war file. Reverse.war right here. I'm going to go ahead and just upload that. And we can hit deploy. I'm not sure, actually. I don't want to tell you the wrong thing. Before you hit deploy, I'm going to clear this screen. We need to set up a listener. So the listener we're going to set up, we're just going to use netcat NVLP like this. This is pretty standard for listening. Going to do listening on port 4444. And now what we're doing here is we've opened this port. We are waiting for anything to talk to us on this port. So let's deploy this file. And I believe we actually have to execute it. So yeah, it didn't connect back. So what happens now, we've got this reverse file here. Click on it. And we got a compilation error. Let's see what happened. Let's undeploy it and let's try it again. We may have to rerun one more time. I'm going to re-upload it, deploy, click it. Okay, I'm going to browse and run my one from yesterday that I ran. Just make sure that it's actually working. Okay, that's working. I must have had a typo or something, guys. I'm sorry. So we cleared this. So let's go ahead and just do it again. And I'll show you the process one more time. So we've got the cheat sheet. I'm going to type it out on my own. I may have just done something wrong. So MSF Venom, payload of Java, JSP, shell, verse, TCP. We're at 10, 10, 14, 36. Is that correct? Yep. And L port is 4444. I'm going to call this 5555. I just don't know if the connection is going to stay open on the other side. And if yours worked, let me know. If you got the same error, also let me know. We'll just call this rev2. Let's see what works. I'm going to Control C here and kill this and listen again on all 5s. Let's browse. And I put it somewhere, put it in downloads on accident. Must be a war. Okay. There we go. I must have had a typo or something in the first one. So now we've got a reverse shell connection, and we are on Microsoft Windows. Looks like 2013. I think we're on a server 2012. That's what it looks like. We can just say, who am I? Host name. Same deal here. So with this instance, we are authority system, which is the same thing as being root. Hey, Free Show, thanks for joining me, man. I appreciate it. Hope to see you around again sometime, man. So we're in here, and the process is very, very similar to what I was talking about when it comes to post enumeration. We're looking to dump the SAM file. So typically what I would do here, if I've got a weird shell like this, I'm probably going to elevate this into some type of Meterpreter shell. And just because Meterpreter has a lot more flexibility, it can download, upload. It can do hash dumps. It can run Kiwi for credentials. It can run incognito for trying to steal tokens. There's a lot more stuff that I'm looking at when it comes to this. And what we would do is pretty much I would generate a MSF Venom, similar to what we just did here. I would do a reverse shell for Meterpreter. There's a Meterpreter payload. Set the same kind of deal here and set the file type to executable instead of a war. I'd put this guy on the system, execute it, and get a Meterpreter reverse shell with it. So we would use that. We would just do some searching around similar to the first machine. But we are approaching 9:30 on the nose. So if I ran through that one a little quicker, I'm sorry. You guys are more than welcome to ask me any questions that you have. Now's the time. I'm happy to stay here as long as you want and answer as many questions as you guys have. So feel free to fire away. Government pen testing. Yes, kind of. So there's a lot of contract work for pen testing. You're still going to need. So I don't know if you're if we're talking the U.S. Like I talk to the U.S. A lot of the work is contract out of like D.C. or Virginia. You'll need a clearance, usually top secret, and those are the ones who typically go in and they'll attack, like say. Like the Navy, they'll do like a naval-based pen test or something, or just different things like that. As an example, the military also needs people, and they are looking. That would also require top secret clearance, but they are training right now as well. So the training is like a year long, and probably pretty top of the line if I had to guess, because in that aspect you're attacking other countries. So that's kind of cool. Where I used to work, Sandia National Labs, they have a red team there. That's contract work, very similar. They're doing just different government and non-government sites without being too specific. And yeah, so you still need a clearance for that. So anything government related, if you wanted to do that, definitely going to need a clearance, and the pay might not be as good as the outside. For what it's worth. Weirdest Prevesk I've ever pulled off. That's a good question. I could tell you, how about I tell you the weirdest domain admin I've ever pulled off? and we'll talk about Samba in a second. I hate Samba, man. So weirdest domain admin, I was on a mixed environment. Mixed meaning not Linux and Windows, but meaning that there was domain users and non-domain users. So domain users were used occasionally to connect to SMB, but typically they were used as, just like here and there as needed. Usually the user had their own system access to their account, and they had admin access on a local account. So if you rooted a user or a computer, you weren't really getting anywhere anyway. But what I did like is I did some searching around and looked around for default credentials, and I found a Kyocera printer. The Kyocera printer was whatever the login was, admin 123456778, and logged in with that. There is a Meterpreter or Metasploit module that dumps clear text passwords. So what's going on is if they're using that Kyocera to scan, then what you can do is, best practice would be to set up a non-admin, right, to scan to this, scan the computer folder or files to a folder on a computer. You'd set up an SMB account, not administrative, to do that. Well, I dumped it. There was that account there, but the CEO himself wanted his own account, own everything for his computer, so his credentials were in there, clear text as well. So I logged in as him on his computer, and I got a Meterpreter shell. I used psexec, which just logs in through SMB and uploads malicious malware, and then connects to you with a Meterpreter. From there, I loaded a tool called Incognito, which looks for tokens. I did token impersonation, and I actually logged him into the domain controller because he was CEO. He had full access, is what it is. So I logged him into the domain controller as a non-domain account. He was a local account. And then I used token impersonation to impersonate the domain admin and got win. Yeah, man. You think a printer can't get you, a printer can get you. Let's see, graduating InfoSec. I was wondering, how did I get into pen testing? Okay, so you guys want to know my story. I was an accountant 3 years ago. December 2015 is when I started my first IT job. It was help desk. So I left accounting. I was fed up with it. I hated it. I was living in like the middle of nowhere because I moved for money. Like I left all my friends for money, left a girlfriend behind. And when we're talking money, we're talking $55,000. We're not talking a lot of money. So left everything behind to go to the middle of nowhere for a 45 fucking minute drive to and from work. I had the worst boss that I think anybody would ever have in their lifetime. I'm sure other people can say the same, but you get one accountant. Let's put this in perspective. You get one accountant per boss. And I was her 8th accountant in 3 years. That's how many people had quit on her. There was one time, just for an example, I was leaving. It was 4:59. And she looks at me. She's like, "You still have a minute left to work. Where are you going?" Well, she was a micromanager to the max. And, one day I walked out and I never looked back. I moved to the West Coast on a whim. Didn't have a job, applied for IT jobs, didn't have any certs. I just felt that I would be okay at help desk, and kind of got lucky. Talked my way into a job, said, "Look, I don't know. I'll take less than what you're offering. I'll learn what you want me to learn. And please just give me a chance and let me prove myself." And so I did that. Within a couple months, I had my A+, my Net+, Security+, and I found out about the CEH because I thought it was cool. It sounded cool that you get to hack things. And that's when I really learned about like the hacker side of the house. So I just thought like a hacker was like a bad guy. I didn't know you can get paid to actually do penetration testing. So I just started working towards that. I got my Linux Plus, got my CEH, then I did my CCNA when I became a network engineer, and OSCP, OSWP, what else? I did my EWPT once I became a pen tester, and then Pen Test Plus I took in beta and ended up passing that too. So Just kind of nabbed my path. So December 2015, I started help desk, and March 2018, I became a pen tester. Let me scroll back up. So how easy is it to avoid working with or for military gov agencies as a pen tester? It's really easy. And pay scale's higher if you work in the private sector, would be my guess. A lot of the work in pen testing is on the East Coast. Not to say that they're not coming out in other places. There's work in Arizona. There's a lot of work in the West Coast as well. Those are more like, like Google. Tesla's got car hackers and stuff, but they kind of want you to know some things. San Diego's got a lot of work, but that's kind of because there's a base out there. So Orlando, like Florida, has a lot of work. There's also bases out there, but you can find it. I mean, or get some experience if you're willing to move. East Coast has all kinds of jobs. As a Lucio player, I don't hate Sombra. I hate Sombra when I'm playing Widowmaker. Or anything else, because she's just annoying. I don't think anybody should be able to be invisible and then teleport. So that's just my 2 cents on that. But I am a Roadhog as well, so she doesn't bother me too much when I play Roadhog. Switching in the field, just getting started, looking to make as much knowledge gain progress as quick as possible. I've any future character prepare for a GI Bill, but it's going through formal education. If yes, if you already have a bachelor's, and this is for Whiskey Rick, by the way. If you already have a bachelor's and you got your GI Bill, look into the SANS graduate program. And it's like $40,000. It's expensive as hell, but if you got the GI to pay for it, you come away with like 8 or 9 SANS certs, and those are money, dude. I mean, everybody loves SANS certs. I don't know, the government's got a hard on for SANS, so. I am 29 this year. I'm going to be 30 in a couple months in terms of age. Hackers can be paid for illegal stuff. It's true. They get paid more, actually. Yeah, CEH, no offense to anybody, CEH is kind of a joke. Just my opinion. What about the Pen Test Plus? Pen Test Plus is actually a good test. I took it after the OSCP and actually thought it was hard because it required you to know coding, at least being able to read code. And I took it in beta, so there was no studying for it. It was just kind of what do you know, what don't you know? I think it's better than the CEH. I don't think it's better than the OSCP, but I do think that there's not enough jobs out there that even know or have it on their list yet. Still going through these. Sorry, I'm a little behind, guys. Yeah, no problem, man. I understand that. I left the government military life myself, so definitely better on the private side. Okay, you're deleting people from across the map if you're a good widow, which I don't know about you, but I don't play in high enough rank to be a good widow. So, yeah, I just hate Sombra, man. She may be one of the heroes I hate the most. And I feel like you're a Sombra main and we can't be friends. Yeah, Sans is expensive. On a side note, not skipping you, Spoon, but Sans is expensive. But if he's getting it paid for with the GI Bill, then you can't beat that. 9 free Sans courses? Shit. Let's see. Work as a sysadmin ops, transitioning to security analyst position, and currently working towards BS and Comp Sci. The security aspect of the degree is a joke and covered absolute basics. Aside from studying for certs like CCNA or Sec Plus, wiggle. So you're transitioning to security analyst. So what do you want to do in security before I make a recommendation, Spoon? And that can be a follow-up. Like if you're looking to stay on the blue team side, that's a different recommendation than if you're looking to get into the red team side. Not saying that having experience in both will help you out. It definitely will. Yeah, and tuition reimbursement, kind of like Black Sheep says, tuition reimbursement. If you can get that from an employer, they'll cover those certs as well. If you're in a production job, you have no IT experience. Depends on what you know, but definitely get your foot in the door somewhere. I'd start with like an A+ help desk type job, and once you get comfortable, move on, go to network engineering, and then try to get into like a SOC analyst or pen testing or whatever. I have no idea if they're changing the CEH. I mean, it's been out for 9 versions now, so unless they're on 10, I don't know. But I took it in 9, and if it's a joke after 9 versions, I don't know what to say. Companies will pay for you to do SAN certs. The right companies will pay. I've never paid for a certification in my career. All the certifications I listed out, they were all paid for by other jobs. Cyber 3-month, any good? I have no idea. So if somebody knows about that Cyber program, please do speak up. I have no idea about that. I like Cyber, some of their courses. Some of them are kind of outdated, but there's some good courses on there that I recommend to people a lot. You got 8 years IT experience. So you're probably still, what kind of work do you want to get into? Because that'll change some things. Okay, so my recommendation for you would be to look at the jobs. This is for Spoon. Look at the jobs that you're applying for or that you want and see what kind of tools they're using. My guess is like IDS, IPS, some kind of SIM tool like Splunk. Learn the tools that they have, or the common ones at least in a lot of these jobs, and go out there and try to take a course on one of those tools. If you can say that you have some base knowledge, or at least show that you've made an effort even though you have no experience in the field, that'll go a long way. That just says, hey, I'm studying out here. I know the tools that you guys want. I'm not proficient, but I can talk to you about these tools at least. It's definitely a good start. You're not going to get, the problem with cybersecurity is the best experience comes on the job. So you just have to find somebody to kind of take a chance on you, and you just got to be willing to prove yourself, show that you're worth taking a chance on. Anytime, Spoon. I don't think any IT job's a waste of time. Experience is experience, and IT audit is still consulting, right? To an aspect. If you're doing red team, you're still getting consulting. Like, you have to go in front of a client and talk about results, and that's part of the job. You'd be surprised how many people are really bad at talking to people. So, still, you're working in IT, you're understanding what things are you're looking for. If you want to go into red team, you're probably going to have to do pen testing first. But I don't think you're wasting your time. But if you're trying to get into red team, I would jump ship eventually and try to get some experience on the red side. And for Benny Boy, for somebody trying to get red team experience, are you already pen testing or... So red team and pen testing are kind of different. I did say I would explain this, so I'm going to go ahead and explain it. So if you are a pen tester, that's where you sit down with the client, you say, I'm going to scan on this date, and here's what I'm going to do. You're going to be noisy, you're going to run Nessus, you're going to Nmap, you're going to run all your vulnerability scanners, and it's going to look like a mess, right? You're going to light up the IDS, IPS like a Christmas tree, like somebody said earlier. If you're doing red team, you might not even be scanning the external perimeter. Your goal is to infiltrate that company like a APT, like a persistent threat would. So what are you doing? If you're doing real red teaming, you might get a month for an engagement or longer, to where you're out there on site. You're sitting next to them when they're eating lunch. You're trying to get a picture of their badge. You're trying to listen for information about them. Like you're doing research on their LinkedIn, on their Facebook, trying to find things they like. Are you going to be able to phish them? Are you going to be able to call them and get passwords out of them? Are you going to be able to throw a USB stick in the parking lot kind of deal? You're likely not throwing an exploit out. Not saying that you might not, but you're more likely going to social engineer your way in, get malware into the system somehow, and then work your way in from that. You want to be as quiet as possible. So the red team is more about being quiet and seeing if you can get all the way. You want to extract whatever data they want you to extract. That's going to be talked about before. Like say it's like research data, or they have proprietary information that they don't want a Chinese company, just as example, to have, and they think that it's Chinese companies after them, right? They're going to hire you to do what a Chinese APT would do, which is social engineering and get out there and try to get their way in as slowly as possible. Hey, thanks, Pineapple. That means a lot, man. I really appreciate the feedback. If you're aiming for penetration tester, red team, exploit, so depending on your background, exploit development, you're going to want to know some coding. I've got a book here. If you've never done exploit development, give me 1 second. I'm going to stand up here. This is pretty good. Hacking the Art of Exploitation. It's on 32-bit systems, so I don't want to say it's outdated because it's still the fundamentals, right? Like we're on 64-bit now, and things change a little bit. But if you want to pick up exploit development and see if this is for you, this is your book. So it goes through, I think, C++ to start, and then goes through and kind of teaches you the way. So definitely, if you're interested, pick that up. I would recommend looking into pen test work and seeing if you like that. And then the red team's going to come after being a pen tester pretty typically, unless you're like a really good social engineer or you have some kind of like military elite special forces background or something, you know, where like they could use you on one of the elite red teams, something like that. Likely you're going to be a pen tester first. Hi, Maddie. How's it going? So hacking games like Night Team 4. I've never even heard of that. If you can tell me a little bit about it, or I can look it up. I've only played Hacknet, which was free through like Humble Bundle or something, and I just ended up playing it through there. So that was okay. It wasn't spot on, but it was okay. I do plan to stream like this once a week would be my goal. I'm on here more often than that. I'm just typically playing video games or whatever. You can chat with me anytime. Like you can come say hello, ask me questions about your life. You want counseling? I can give you counseling. It's not going to be good advice, but I'm always here to chat. But typically once a week, videos like this. Other streams, I'll leave this one up. I'll delete my other streams typically, unless it's like groundbreaking, revolutionary, which it never is. Let's see. Layer 8 is the most vulnerable. You're right. Okay, let me tell you about AWS. AWS, if you can get an AWS cert, especially whatever the middle tier cert is, that is money right now. I think that's over 100K just for that cert, and that's like not even the principal level. The solutions architect, I think is what it's called. So everything's migrating to the cloud. And if you can understand cloud security and do cloud assessments, there's still pen testing work on that side. So especially if you do the AWS security type work, you would be in high demand. People would be knocking down your door. The certifications are hard as hell, but there's a reason that they're paying so much, but it's super in demand right now. Hey, you have that book. That's awesome. Yeah, and if you guys want to share resources, feel free to share resources. I'm not an exploit dev guy. I don't even know enough to be dangerous. I can barely do a buffer overflow. So, I appreciate you joining me, Rory, if that's how you say it. But you definitely kept me on my toes a bit and gave me some new information. Plus, I might want to exploit myself later. So. Army background, college background, graduated with DFIR. I mean, look for entry-level jobs. Are you trying to stay in forensics? It depends what you want to work. Do you want to like work military or not military? I guess like police work, or are you trying to work for like bigger names like FireEye, etc. for octal escapes? Thanks, Benny Boy. I appreciate that, man. And Hacknet was silly. I agree. Well, if you want to work in pen testing, Skalix, I don't know how to say your name. I'm sorry. So I would just get into where you can, man. Go and get a job working in the field somewhere. Start getting out some experience. If they've got like a DEF CON meetup, DC meetup, look at meetups in your area. Whatever the website is. I think it might literally be meetups.com. Look for a meetup. Oh, it's meetup.com. Look for a meetup in your area. Start networking with people. Start going to B-sides. Just start talking to other pen testers and trying to get in the field. You'll find at a lot of these places, like most people are trying to become a pen tester right now. There's not a lot of pen testers. There's more jobs than there are people right now. So it's definitely a booming field. There's a lot of people interested in it. It's just, you got to kind of network your way in a little bit too. Parrot OS. I have never used Parrot. I know of people that use Parrot and enjoy it. They actually prefer it over Kali, but I have no way that I can say that with any affiliation. So I don't know, to be honest with you, but I've heard good things. I've never heard a bad thing about Parrot. Hey, thanks for the kind word, MBH. I appreciate that. I can't say my salary on live stream. I'm sorry, but I'm comfortable. That's awesome that you started, Sinister, man. If you knock that out, it's gonna do well for you. Welcome, Flexagon. It's better to be late than never, right? So you'll be fine. The stream's gonna be on demand as soon as this is over, so you'll be fine. Thanks, man. If you hit me up if you ever do actually stream some Hack the Box. I like to learn from other people as well. So I'll follow you back. Shoot you an ad. So anytime NVIDIA drivers, this is just from experience, this could be way off, but NVIDIA drivers and Linux, you're going to want to blacklist Nouveau. Don't know if that's the issue with Parrot or not. How do you network when you have a toddler and your wife is about to have twins? That's a good question. Your wife's got to be really understanding. So it depends. Like, you don't want to put a strain in your relationship because family comes first. But at the same time, like, you definitely want to tell her, like, this is what I want to do. And I had to do that with my wife, especially with, like, the OSCP. I locked myself in a room for 2 months, and my wife and I barely talked. Like, I made days for her and stuff, but I was like, I sat her down beforehand. I said, hey, this is what I want to do in my life. I need this certification to kind of nudge me along. And the certification takes a lot of hours. So it's going to be 12-hour days for me. We're not going to see each other a lot. I just want you to, like, to know. And as long as she's understanding, you might have to have that kind of situation with your wife where you tell her, like, I need a network. Bring her along. Maybe she's interested. Who knows? Like, they're typically not interested, but just a thought. So Matt, I think Hacknet is okay. I would have to check out Night. I have no idea. I'd have to check it out. If it's cheap, I might pick it up. But the reason why I'm okay with Hacknet is, even if it's not spot on, it still teaches you some things that make sense. It drives interest into hacking. I would hope nobody comes from that game and is like, oh, I'm a elite hacker now, like. But it does teach some IT related things. I think when I was playing around in it, like, it had the correct port numbers and it had other details that were accurate. It wasn't like how you would hack by any means, but if it drives interest and drives people to the field to learn more, that's cool. Flexagon, no reverse engineering today. If I ever do reverse engineering, that will likely only be like a buffer overflow walkthrough, like a live one, but it would be very, very, very basic because I am very special when it comes to reverse engineering. I'm not good at it. Recent grad military. Is that a 15 whiskey? 15 whiskey drones? To get anything in security. I don't think, if you're a grad, depending what your degree's in and your military background, you're going to have to put some time in. It depends if you have any certs at all. Yeah, I mean, so if you've got certifications, then maybe you might get in somewhere and skip the desk. If your degree is in like cybersecurity, maybe not. It's not probably going to work. If your degree is in like, trying to think here. If your degree is in like a coding background, like computer science, then you might be able to skip help desk. Like, I wouldn't want you going to help desk or tell you to go to help desk. But you might have to put some time in the desk, even if it's like 6 months, man. But people disagree with me, so that's just how I got there. People might be able to tell you different, but I know people who are struggling to get in as SOC and they've worked the desk, so it's not easy. You stream security, Black Sheep? I will shoot you a follow, sir. Sorry if I just assumed your gender. And followed. Okay. So I'm still working out the kinks of the schedule. This is a first time deal. I want to do it once a week. I'll be on occasionally, video gaming, etc., where you can just chat. If you want to chat, I'm here to chat. But in terms of like doing demos and stuff, my intention is to do something similar to this, like 2 boxes a week, maybe a Q&A. Maybe just do like one stream where it's Q&A, or do like I have some hopes for like an all-day kind of course, like an 8-hour, like all-day fiasco for a beginner, pen tester course. Because this kind of just skips right into it. But if like people who don't know Linux or networking or any of that, just kind of like cover the very, very basics. Maybe do some intermediate and advanced courses later as well. But just kind of the stream goal right now is definitely 2 boxes once a week. Yeah, so I'm going to self-plug here. Give me 1 second. I'm going to post a couple links. If I have any advice to give, this is my advice from a blog I wrote. Talks about my journey into InfoSec, and it talks about all the ways that I recommend you to get into InfoSec. I've gotten pretty good feedback on it, so I would recommend it. It's a pretty long read, though, but definitely worth reading, I think. But I'm biased, so what do I know? What time do I wake up? Pretty much when I feel like it. It depends if I got things to do. Like my schedule's for work's like 8 to 5. I don't wake up earlier than I have to, but if I worked longer the day before, like Monday, I put in a 13-hour day, and today I put in 9. So like I might by the end of the week, depending, I might not even have to work on Friday. I work at a place where like they really harp on you for getting 40 hours and not working over 40 hours unless you absolutely have to. But if there's like an hour that I have to, or I want to sleep in, I got a doctor's appointment or whatever, you just make it up kind of deal. Unless there's like a pressing assessment or something like that. Yeah, I'm definitely planning on the ground up basics whiskey rig. And I've got a special place in my heart for 15 whiskeys, Octal. Just throw that out there. I was not a 15 whiskey. Okay, long story. Try to make it as short as possible. 17 Sierra, that is cyber, right? Air Force cyber? Yeah, okay. So 15 whiskey, I was enlisted to be a 15 whiskey, and I had to get a flight physical. Even though it's for drones, we had to do that, whatever, that flight physical. So my recruiter waited a month out before I was shipping out. So I enlisted into like DEP or whatever in August. I was shipping out in February. So he waited till January to send me to this flight physical, which takes a month to get the results back from wherever it goes to. And the results come back like a week before I'm supposed to ship out. I think it's Fort Rucker or wherever. So my results come back a week before I'm supposed to ship out. And they say, you failed your flight physical. You can't do this job. So either pick a new one or see you later, So by that time, I canceled my lease. I'd quit my job, etc. I had to go to my job and beg them for another week. At that point, I hated the Army. I didn't want anything to do with them, but I didn't have any real options. So I went back and I said, I'm not going to do full time. What do you have on the reserve side? And they didn't have a lot that were shipping in a week. It was what was it? A whiskey, 68 whiskey, which is medical. They had a dental, which is what I ended up doing. And then they had a 31 Bravo, which is, I think, military police. So I ended up shipping out like a week later. But in between that, the cancellation period and the week that I shipped out, they call me and they say, hey, we looked at the wrong age group for your flight physical. You never actually failed. We looked at an 18-year-old. I was 24 when I joined. So they were like, sorry, this flight physical is good for 5 years. But the job comes up like once every 6 months for 15 whiskey. So 15 whiskey at heart, never got to do it, unfortunately. But maybe everything happens for a reason, I would say most jobs are salary. There are hourly jobs, but those are typically contract work, and I try to avoid people who message me about contract work. A bachelor's in CS, but you don't really need certs. You need to be able to prove yourself in an interview, but you could go to a research shop pretty much right away. It would not be very difficult for you, I don't think. The CS is held above all others right now in this field, especially for doing research. Navy crypto is probably one of the hardest ones to get into. So that's awesome that you're Navy crypto. Also, I'm going to throw in a quick link. If you guys are veterans, I'm going to type this out. We've got a Slack channel. It's called VetSec. We've got about 400 and something people in there right now. So if you're not already a member, some of the guys are already over here, but if you're not a member, do check it out. All veterans, other countries are represented as well, but everybody works in cybersecurity or is going for cybersecurity. So definitely send an invite. We'll get you in there. Awesome. Thanks, man. And I will check the Slack invites after this stream. So I will get everybody in there that has applied. My phone's blowing up right now, so I'll have to navigate through it. And do I have a... You can reach me on Twitter. Any of the links down below. Let me peek at my... I don't even remember what I put in there. Let me peek at my channel. Yeah, YouTube, probably not the best way, but if you want to subscribe, you can. Twitter is good. Discord channel is good. And if you actually look at my YouTube, there's my LinkedIn and stuff on there. I'm going to come up with an email address eventually and have a way to email me, but probably Discord would be the best. It's faster than email, but Twitter is good as well. Hey, Black Sheep, thanks for joining, man. It's been great having you here. A person can I saw when you followed earlier, Isle of Dong. I had to laugh. I shared your name with my wife. I said it wasn't Isle with an A. It's like a whole Isle, like ISLE. So without having to leave their house, you can get the OSCP without having to leave your house. Any of the eLearn securities you can get without leaving your house. CEH, I think. You'd have to look into which ones do the monitored, whatever the monitored testing. I know the CEH does. I know the OSCP does. Yeah, so they do. Some do like live proctoring with the webcam now. I did that for the CEH a while ago. Hey, thanks, Ian. Good luck with the invite. It's not gonna be that bad. And then just go work through the easy ranked boxes if you can. Let me hop onto my Kali here. If you come into HackTheBox and let me back up one, I would poke around for difficulties that are like this. Like especially if you're just starting out, start on these ones. Leave these guys alone. Don't even come over here. And honestly, they're more capture the flag like boxes anyway. If you enjoy that game aspect, which a lot of people do, but like Jerry, look at Jerry. That's how easy. If you followed along with Jerry tonight, that's how easy a lot of these are. Okay, so offensive security in a nutshell. Expired, and somebody asked about the OSCE earlier. I think I'm sorry if I missed that. That just refreshed in my head. So OSCP is like the gatekeeper. I was going over that earlier. It's like the gatekeeper of the pen testing world, the HR of the pen testing world. Like if we go to Indeed, here's my searches. We go to Indeed and we search the OSCP. You get 822 job results. If you go to ECPPT, I always have a hard time saying that. This is the equivalent of the eLearn security side. You get 9 results. So I will give my opinion. My opinion is that the OSCP is incredibly outdated. If you go into an interview with the information that you know in the OSCP, you're going to get a pat on the back and be told to learn more. So you're still going to have to study some more before you may be able to get a junior level. And it depends on where you go, but typically they want more knowledge than what's given out in the OSCP now. The OSCP is like the try harder, get the methodology down. It's kind of really capture the flaggy, but it's the gatekeeper. What can you do, right? There's nothing that's going to get you into an interview, especially at a junior level, that is faster than the OSCP. I will add that eLearn Security, if you can do both because eLearn Security is way more current. I think that their platform's better. I think everything is by far exceeds it, but 9 job results to 822 job results, it just speaks how it is. So until eLearn Security catches up, offensive security is going to be the top dog. In terms of the OSCE, I think it's incredibly outdated, but from what I hear, people say that it is still relevant when it comes to exploit development. I don't have it, so I don't want to bash it. The OSWP I do have, don't even touch that. They have never updated it, and it focuses 90% on web. So I would avoid that one. But the OSCP, if you're looking into that, it's the gatekeeper. Thanks, man. I'll get to all the invites. I see yours coming through right here on my phone, so I'll get to the invites in a bit. So it's weird because let's search the OSWP. I'm just curious. Look at this. A lot of places still ask for it, but that test was a joke, man. A joke. You get 4 hours to do the exam. I can't talk about the exam, but if it's 90% WEP in the course, you can assume what the exam is. Yeah, they're asking for CEH. They're just asking for any offensive security under the sun. That's Verizon. Verizon has got a hard on for them. Yeah, so not as many, 69 jobs, but you're almost guaranteed to be asked about wireless in a interview. Every interview I've had for pen testing has asked me about wireless. So it's not a hard process. You just need to know that you're capturing a 4-way handshake and that you can crack it. I mean, other than that, it's just syntax that you need to memorize. And if they're running enterprise, EAP or something like that, it's different, but it's not bad. And the OSCE looks good on a resume, so I can't knock it. I know some people going through it. 274 jobs on the OSCE. Yeah, you just have to memorize I always go back before an interview or whatever and remember or try to remember what the air crack suite is, because there's a few different tools. You just gotta be able to talk through them, what you would do, what you're listening for, and how you're capturing that 4-way handshake. No worries. Security Plus is okay if you're a beginner or if you are working in U.S. government 8570 requirements. If you're mid-level already, then I wouldn't do the Security Plus. But it just depends. What is your background? That'll help me answer it better. I'm signed up for Aries. I've got so many courses I've signed up for that I can't even. I'm working through the web application penetration testing extreme right now. I've got PTX, which is penetration testing extreme, and Aries on the back burner, and then the what is it? I forget. Pentest Academy just released a Active Directory course, so I went and bought that. It was $200 for labs. So I've got a lot of work ahead of me in terms of studying. But it's good to hear that Aries is good, because I've heard mixed things, but I have high hopes for it. Because like I said, I don't know a ton about reverse engineering. So you got a college degree and you've worked help desk. What's your degree in? And you're trying to get into security jobs. computer information technology. Have you considered working network first, getting some network experience, and then going to like SOC? You can do help desk into SOC. It's just hard, but you would definitely need experience and tool sets or something there to achieve that. Any other questions, you guys? In terms of entry-level work, there's a ton of entry-level network jobs. You can be a junior network person. You could try to get like an analyst job, network analyst, and then see, maybe even find somewhere that has a blue team, like a bigger organization, and then try to like work your way over. Like the people have said, a lot of it's networking, so you just have to network your way in. So if you can get a job at a bigger company and then work your way over there, that'd be a good way to do it too, just to get some experience. So yeah, I do plan on doing it weekly. I've got to toy around and see what time frame. I'm thinking that it's probably still going to be like a weekday night or something, because most people are busy on the weekends. They don't want to watch me talk. But if I do like an all day course or something, it's going to be on like a Saturday or Sunday if we do like an 8-hour crazy stream. But typically I'm guessing like a Tuesday or Wednesday is probably pretty good. Not a Friday or Monday, because nobody wants to watch those. My day has been awesome. Thank you for asking. Got to do some internal penetration testing today. It was fun. Got domain admin pretty quick, so had a good day. Legal limit to ethical disclosure. So that's up to you. If you've got something, if you've got a vulnerability and it's like critical and they're not doing anything about it and you've waited like months, maybe you put it out there. I wouldn't put it out there under your name. I wouldn't put it out there on anything like that could tie back to you. I'd be on a VPN, etc. But if it's just like, if they're using HTTP, I don't know if that's enough. Like if you found like a way into their network and you can dump like personal information or something, that would be alarming. That needs to be addressed pretty quick. Thanks, Whiskey Man. It was nice having you. You asked some great questions. What is a blue team daily job like? I don't know, because I haven't worked the blue team much. My guess is that you sit in front of probably 10 screens or more, and you wait for alerts to come up. If alerts aren't coming up, you're probably doing other things like trying to establish baselines, trying to tweak your SIM, trying to just get new policies in place. That way you can start detecting. A lot of times we'll do engagements with a blue team on the red side, and it's called like purple teaming. So you do an attack and you say, hey, did you see it? They say no. Then you do the attack again, you let them tweak, and you keep doing it until they do see it. So there might be some engagements like that, but typically somebody's probably watching screens and they're also trying to always adjust and get better on their SIM, would be my guess. CCNA studying is boring in general. So I don't know if you should consider a different career. I have my CCNA and I hated it. I studied for AWS and I never took it because I thought that was the most boring subject I've ever looked at. So just because one sector or one area of IT is boring doesn't mean that it's all boring. So if IT is exciting to you, definitely keep at it. But if not, maybe you should look into something else if you don't find any IT exciting. Hey, Night SwampSec, thanks for coming in here. It's purely preference on which VM you want to use. I've always used VMware. I've heard good things about it. At the time I installed it, I think I was hearing bad things about VirtualBox. Can't speak to what those are. I've used VirtualBox in the past, but not a lot. I've only used VMware pretty much primarily since I've been doing this. So, well, you have the video to reference back to. So, Octal, I'll say this is worth 100 CPEs. You can quote me on it. Bring it to your employer. Bring it to the CISSP. Tell them 100 CPs. Only 100? Man, I'm doing you a favor. This is how you treat me? If that's the case, if you got user passwords and credentials, then you need to disclose if they're not responding back. If that's your ethical line, I mean, it's completely up to you. But like I said, you don't want to disclose as you. It's a risky fine line, depending on your country too, because you can get. They can come after you for attacking them, if that makes sense, if you didn't have the permission to do it. So there's definitely a fine line of ethics there, because you're probably poking around when you should be, and they're not responding when they should be. I do like Who's Line. We could start dishing out some points here. UDP, yeah, Nmap can scan for UDP. So it's just Nmap like that. Instead of we were using SS, it's just SU. It takes forever. It takes a very long time. I don't know about SSL TLS ciphers. I've never used that. They brought back Who's Line, didn't they? It's not Drew Carey anymore. It's, who is it, Aisha Tyler? Thanks, Kev. I appreciate the nice words, man. Drew's too busy. Drew's doing the wheel spinny thing. What is Price is Right? My first exploit? Let me think about that. Yes. Night, man. Thanks for tuning in. Again, thanks for keeping me on my toes. So my first exploit was an external. And so I created a script that runs through have I been pwned dumps that are out there, right? So they're already cracked have I been pwned dumps. And I gathered basically a list of user emails or usernames and addresses for the company that have been in any of these dumps. So I take these emails and passwords, and there was a server, I think it was Lotus Notes, running on external. First of all, shouldn't have Lotus Notes on your external. Anyway, Lotus Notes running on the external. So when you would log in and validate with a good user, basically I just pushed all the credentials with Burp Suite. If you've never seen that, then that's okay. But I pushed all the credentials through. But when I found a valid user, it would just refresh to a login screen. So it didn't like tell you if you went in there and signed in with the user. But there was like a slight difference in the byte size of the actual the request or the response. So the byte size came back different. So I got a valid session. So what I did is that username wasn't tied to Active Directory in the sense to that password, because that was just for Lotus Notes. But Lotus Notes has an exploit where if you have a valid user, you can dump all the usernames and passwords, right? So I did that, dumped all the usernames, passwords. They had Outlook on the external, so I sprayed Outlook with all the usernames, passwords I had. We kind of talked about this earlier, where Outlook does user enumeration based on a time response. So if the user's valid, it comes back and says, right away, this is valid. And then it says, if it's not valid, there's a time delay, and that's how Metasploit knows it's not valid. So eventually I got it down to where, okay, none of the passwords from that Lotus dump worked either, but now I've got 1,000 usernames that are sitting here. So I take these 1,000 usernames and I say, okay, well, it's fall, it's 2018 or whatever, I don't know, whatever the password was, and an exclamation. Sent it all with those usernames, and one of them popped, and used that credentials because they're Active Directory. Used that credential to log into the VPN, and I was inside the network. So it was a bit of a chain. I don't remember if it was client-side or not. I just know that they didn't have any, they had no protection on login attempts. Thanks for the kind words again, Octal. You've been great, man. How I manage my screens. So I only ever use one screen. Use my main Kali VM. Like when I was doing the OSCP, I had 2 or 3 screens. I had my laptop in the middle and then 2 screens on the side, if that makes sense. So I use those. But since I only have my VM, the other one was just doing Google. I mean, that's it. It's pretty much you're living in Google. Everything else is done in Kali. How you keep organized. So just have your notes ready. Like if you're doing your buffer overflow, have your notes typed out for how you do your buffer overflow, and then just edit the pictures out with the pictures you're doing from the exam, and then you've already got a part of your report written. No need to reinvent the wheel and do it twice. So same thing, like if there's a method you've been using, like I use KeepNote most of the time. If there's a method you've been using to store things, you can kind of like type things out like box 1, box 2, box 3, box 4, however you like to subcategorize your folders. Like for me, it was I like to have like the Nmap scan, any vulnerabilities I found, any like information I found post exploit, etc. in there. And so I set up my folders. I had everything ready to go as much as I could before I got started. That way it was just pretty easy. I think I had my exam and report written in the first 24 hours. I just wanted to go to bed. How do you find dumps? Google. So I don't know how to do it exactly. You just kind of gotta Google like have I been pwned dump, and there's last time I checked, there's some new ones out. I'm running on an older list, but there was a magnet of a torrent out there that was on GitHub. So that should be a good starting point. If you could find the magnet on a GitHub for the download of the torrent, it should be good enough. It's a pretty big file. And then I just built a bash script that parses through there, which I'll share that at some point, I'm sure. I've shared it in a previous video. What do you mean by that? Can you elaborate, Ion? What do you mean intro to pwn time? Oh, that just depends on the environment. If they're locked down, you might not pwn anything. If you're talking like a capture the flag, it just depends too. Sometimes I get it really quick and sometimes it's slow, but if the Nessus report comes back with something like glaring, like if you've got, say, Eternal Blue or something on your scan, then you could be pwning within 5 or 10 minutes. But a lot of the times it's like digging around, checking as many boxes as you can, and just kind of doing what you can in the scope and the time frame that you're given. Sometimes there's a lot of IP addresses and it takes a while. Does the wife complain? No, I'm texting my wife right now. She's okay with everything. So, I mean, we're doing all right, and pretty much my work-life balance is so good that we hang out most nights, and we get to see each other quite a bit. So, it's a good field. It just depends on the job too. Like some pen testers travel a lot. I'm lucky in the sense that I don't really travel, and I work remote for the most part. I have to be on site sometimes, but I would say like 5% of the time, 10% of the time. It's not a lot of travel. There's a lot of pen testers who do a lot of travel, like 30%, 40%. So she would definitely complain. I traveled to my last job, and that was not well for the relationship. Good for the relationship. Looks like we're dwindling down on viewers, guys. I'll probably keep the stream up till 11 at the latest if you guys have any questions, though. But it looks like you guys are getting bored, getting sleepy. Yeah, man. Happy wife, happy life. Definitely comes first. So make sure you take care of your family and plan your job around it. After the OSCP, depends what you're interested in. Like web app, probably. Web app's huge. No, OSCP doesn't really teach you web app. So like eLearn security, the web application penetration testing, or the extreme version of that as well. Active Directory training's good. Red Team labs are good. HackTheBox has offshore and Rasta labs, which are Active Directory focused. So I think web apps and Active Directory training would probably be my next step if you're trying to be a pen tester or hacker. Working on red teaming now. That's good. I think the Pen Tester Academy has the Red Team Labs. I haven't tried those out yet. HackTheBox and OCP. Nice. I've heard really good things about offshore and Rasta, but offshore specifically. Hey, thanks for the donation, Isle. I really appreciate that, man. Love your name again. CISSP. Value, yes. Are you going to learn anything? I don't know. So I don't have it. Haven't been in IT long enough to have it. I guess I've been in auditing and everything with accounting background enough, but I haven't gone for it yet. If you want value in terms of like finding a job, every job asks for that stupid cert. But everybody I know that has it hates it. They hated getting it. They hated studying for it. They hate the requirements for. They just up the charge from like $85 to $135 for the whatever renewal of the cert is. So fees and everything. But it is it's on a lot of job postings. We can check those. It's quite a bit. Opens a lot of doors. 12,299 jobs. Thanks again, Isle, man. I really appreciate that. Definitely gonna be streaming soon. Do I have pics or specs of my PC? So donation link is right below. If you scroll down, there's a donation button down there. There's also a Patreon page as well if you're interested, but it should take you to the Streamlabs donation page. I can show you the button. Let's see, does this take me to my Twitch? It does. You scroll down right here, this button. So yeah, 12,299 jobs for CISSP. So is it valuable? Is there value? Yeah, there's value. And I don't have any pics of my computer really. I was going to do a review on the case because I just upgraded the case and put a new motherboard in. But I can tell you the specs, and if you're interested in the case, I can show you that as well. I'm running on i7 9700K. I've got a MSI motherboard. It's a Z390, a Gaming Edge AC. And then I've got G-Skill Aegis 2x16 DDR4. I think it's 2400. What else is in a computer? Graphics card is a 1080 Ti. I don't remember what it is. It's like a steel armor, MSI steel armor, something like that. And then I've just got a generic red liquid cooler. I had a red build before this. The case is something. It's nice. It's pretty to look at, but the inside was very frustrating. There's not a lot of room. Like I had to upgrade to an M2 just to be able to get in. I had to like zip tie a hard drive down because the compartment underneath didn't have enough room for the hard drives and for the power. So I had to remove the area for the power or the hard drive trays. And then they had mounts for SSDs on the case next to the board, but you couldn't mount to the case because then it would interfere with the board. So they needed to make it wider than they did, and it's a mid-tier board, but it's not wide enough. But once you get it all put together, it's very pretty. It's a dark. Let me see. It's like a Phantom Edge or something. I'm going to look at Amazon real quick. Give me a second. I'll shoot you a link. Dark Flash Phantom Black. This is the link here. Yeah, absolutely. I don't know if the review field is the field I want to go into, but I thought about doing a video for it just to work on my editing skills. So I'm not a big reader. I'm more of like a visual person, like a video kind of person. So I kind of like video courses. But I've got, like I just showed this one, I've got this book, The Hacking, Art of Hacking, Art of Exploitation. I've got this one near me too. Practical Python Projects. Both really good. Both by No Starch. No Starch is really good. So reading's just not my thing. I don't know why. I've never been into it. Even in college, like I read what I had to, but it's not like, I don't know, it's not how I learn. I like the NZXT cases. I'm going to Google that case. Let me see. That's a cool case. I like the red and black. That's really cool. My last build was red and black. I haven't heard of Hacking the Hacker. I've heard good things about the Hacker Playbook 3. There's not a lot of hacking books out there. I've heard some okay things about, like, what is it? How to Hack Like a Porn Star, that guy. Let me see what his name is. Spark Flow is his name. So he set it up like hacking a bank. He's got quite a few. I've never actually read any of these. I've just heard good things. Oh, Gray's cool too. Any other questions, you guys? Got about 15 minutes on my end if you guys got anything else. Donation, I'm not sure, man. Honestly, maybe like just like Patreon if you got one, or I don't know. So the donation's only working with PayPal right now for Streamlabs. I'm not established, Since this is my first stream, I'm not established enough to have anything else, I believe, is the issue. So if you don't have PayPal, it's probably not going to work. They have bits. I'll be an affiliate or whatever next time, so you could save your donation if you want. But I appreciate it. They use bits or whatever as a way to donate, but I have to have 7 days worth of streams, and I think I'm at 5 or 6, so I'm almost there. I see when Kali was super slow in VMware. Was my Kali slow in VMware? Is that what you're saying? Yeah, and you don't have to like subscribe to Patreon if that makes sense. Like if you just want to do like a month, that way they don't recharge you. If that makes sense. I think it's a reoccurring thing. Biggest tip for passing the OSCP, time management. Bigger than anything else is time management. So have a set plan, right? Like if you're going to attack, and if you do research on your own, you can determine what kind of boxes are out there, right? They're basically on point systems. So you got a buffer overflow, which is 25 points. And then you got another 25-point box, 2 20-point boxes, and a 10-point box. Well, you have to scan all the machines except one, right? Your buffer overflow box. So time management would say you should be scanning your other machines while you're working on your buffer overflow. And then you should be taking down boxes as you come across them. Don't spend too much time on one box, but really think about time management. If you can get the 25-point buffer overflow, which is really easy, it's not hard. People make it out to be a lot harder than it is. You get the 25-pointer, you get your 10-pointer, and say you can do that in 2 hours. You've got 35 points, and you can do your lab guide, which is another tip I strongly suggest. You get 5 points for your lab guide. That's 40 points. So you need, 30 points in 22 hours? So that's a 25-point machine and a 20-point machine low priv. It's 2 roots on any box. That may be a root of a 20 and a low priv of 25. I've seen people get away with 25 on the buffer overflow, 10 on the easy box, and then a 20-pointer, which I'm trying to do this math as I go. That's 60. And then they typically give 10 on the, or 55, but they typically give 10 on the 25-pointer is my guess. They don't come out and say it. That's just my guess by talking to people. And then 5 points for your lab report. So there's multiple ways to do it. You don't have to get all 5 boxes. Really, it boils down to 3.5 or 4 boxes, depending on how it works out. And time management's important. So make sure you can do buffer overflow and make sure you just know what you're going to have as a plan of attack and do your damn lab guide. Do I plan on getting a CISSP? Yes, I do. When I go into the management side of the house at some point, I'll probably do it because you'll need it to be a manager in most places. Most important tool. It's a great question. I like Metasploit. I mean, people might bash me for that, but I think Metasploit's one of the most user-friendly tools that you can use because it can do so much. So, I mean, it's enumeration. You've got exploits. You've got pivoting. You've got all kinds of things that it just is available to you. It can load in PowerShell. It can load in incognito. It's got Kiwi for passwords. It does so much. It's such an advanced shell. If you get a shell with it, so much more advanced than just like having a common netcat shell. So if you can learn your way around Metasploit, it's very, very flexible. But really, if you're just starting, like it's a tool point. I would definitely like that one. If you're just starting, definitely learning to enumerate. You're going to be your best friend. So learn enumeration and how to research. So you want to be able to know what you're looking at and how to exploit it. And that's crazy that Streamlabs wants to charge. I didn't know that. So OSCP does not teach practical on the job pen testing. Not in my opinion. It teaches the methodology. It teaches you to be persistent, and it gives you some indication of what some of the tools and vulnerabilities are that are out there, or how to exploit a vulnerability. It gives you like the process, but it's definitely more capture the flag. You're going to want to know Active Directory when you're done with the OSCP if you go the OSCP route. So you need to know what the common exploits are for Active Directory. You don't have to know it like inside and out, but just some of the things that they might come up with on an interview and why they're vulnerable and how to patch them. No, I've never had any instance with Kali being slow or unresponsive. It's been pretty well for me, but I've always been on 12. So I don't know if I had a 12 Pro license, and I've been using that 12 Pro license for a while. I think my laptop might be on 14 or 15, and it got buggy when I upgraded from 12 to 14. So I've been on 12 on this computer. And the eLearn security course, if you're talking the PTS, I don't know if it still is, but it has been free for quite some time. And at least it's free in terms of they give you the slides. If you can read and get information from slides. If you want the videos and the labs, I think it's like $400 for the most expensive version. And of course the certification. But it's definitely more up to date. And a lot of people use it, the EGAPT or whatever, they use that as a precursor to the OSCP. I'm 29. I went to school to be an accountant, so never started school for cybersecurity. I switched to cybersecurity when I was 26. So I switched to IT when I was 26. You just got to be patient on the work for home jobs. Just be really patient. They're out there, and 3 years of SOC experience is pretty good. Should be able to move in, especially if you get a cert like the OSCP. I don't see why not. So just be patient. Yeah, a lot of more senior roles are further remote, but I was able to find it. I had to move for my job. My job's still remote, but a lot of the work is local, so I had to move out here. I really appreciate that, man. Thank you so much. I appreciate the donation. Jack of all trades is good. Small teams are really good learning environments. They help you kind of master, or I guess not master, but just kind of touch everything, you know? Thanks, man. Yeah, I'm definitely curious how people find me. My biggest following's on YouTube at the moment, but Reddit's definitely picking up. If you're interested in any video content, anybody, definitely check out the YouTube link below. I'm trying to post weekly there. I've got some coursework there too. If you're studying for the OSCP, there's a buffer overflow tutorial in there that may help you. So. Yeah, I mean, so what I would suggest is not as a replacement, like still let the third party do it, but just suggest that you're going to do a pen test or asked to do a pen test just to see if you guys can be good at patching your own things, because that would be important. Internal pen testing is still important. Like we pen test internally at our job. We still have people come pen test us, but it's important to at least, know what you have to patch before the pen tester has to get to it, or you're going to be waiting at least once a year. Gotcha. Yeah, that happens, man. Unfortunately, some bosses are like that. But if you got 3 years in security, just being able to, if you could talk the talk and have some knowledge on tools, you might not need a cert, but the cert will definitely help. Other than that, just the knowledge will help. All right, guys, I got about a minute left before I got to go to bed. I just want to thank everyone for joining. Hopefully you learned something today, and hopefully we can keep a consistent schedule. I'll be posting again. I'll post an event on Twitch the next time that I'm going to be running this. It should be next week. I'll be my guest, same time, hopefully. I'll try to put things out on Reddit, on Twitter, LinkedIn, depending where you guys follow me at. So I'll post around and we'll do that, and we'll come up with some boxes. If anybody has some suggestions, go ahead, hit me up on Reddit or Twitter or wherever. If there's a box that you want to see covered and it's on the beginner side of things, I don't want to jump into anything intermediate yet. But we can do this again every week if you guys want. Please do check down below in the description. I do have a Discord channel if you guys want to chat with me there as well. And I've got the YouTube channel if you guys want to shoot me a subscribe. I'm going to be uploading this video, and I've got some other courses kind of like I mentioned. So any tool I suggest for background scanning, just Nmap. If you want, you can stage your Nmap scans. Let me, what's his name? It's Jolly Frogs. Look through this post. Somewhere in here, he talks about staging his scans, staging your Nmap scans. What that means is you want to scan quickly first, like not a -A, but just like pick up all the ports that are open. And then on those ports specifically, you're going to go ahead and deep scan those. So that'll increase the time that it takes. Sometimes the labs are finicky though for the OSCP, and you might just want to scan with what you've been scanning with before. definitely give it a test out the time on the labs if you're still in there and see if it's worth it to you. And yeah, just go from there. Don't try to mix it up the day before the exam or anything. All right, everyone. Thank you so much for joining me. I'll be on occasionally. Like, this is going to be a once a week deal, but if you guys ever want to come chat, I'll be here probably playing Overwatch or game or whatever. So if you guys want to game with me, that's cool too. But yeah, you guys can always feel free to come in here and ask me questions, but I'll get a live stream schedule. Just check back and we'll work it out. So appreciate everyone joining me. Thank you so much.